So this is an interview with Michael Guertin. And action. Welcome, Michael. How you doing?
Thank you, Kevin. An honor to be with you.
All right, we have, let me say who we have. We have Michael Guertin, or to your friends, you're Gertie.
Gertie,
And
yep.
I think everybody's your friend, right?
That's the way I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, and so today we're gonna dive into your life story. We're gonna dive into just what God has been doing in your life and in your wife Kim, and we're just gonna see sort of that touch of grace. So, but let's begin with a little bit about who you are for those who don't know you, who you are, what you're doing, what is your life like now, and then we'll dive into the backstory.
Okay. Michael Robert Guertin, as you said, nicknamed Gertie to many. Right, I'm currently, for the last 24 years, Kim and I have lived totally by faith, and we're under the ordained and under the covering of Elim Fellowship, and so I've been doing itinerant ministry for the last 24 years. After pastoring children for 14 years full time in 4 different states, of course, 4 different churches, and then in the year 2000, as we were moving on from our last children's pastorate, as I sought the Lord, I was originally thinking the next pastorate I took would be a youth pastorate, and my strategy was going to be I will minister to the youth, but also train them to be my children's ministry team. So what I was hoping I could offer the next church I went to was to pastor the youth, but also be the children's minister and have the youth as my ministry team. So that's what I was pondering, praying about, thinking about.
Have you, when you worked at the churches, and we'll get into it, but were you always the kids pastor, or did you youth ministry, a little bit of both?
Right. Every church that I served at, I did a multitude of different capacities, anything from helping the head pastor at times to preach or lead worship, drum for the worship team, pastor the children.
You're a drummer too, then.
Been a drummer all my life.
Okay.
Yep.
We're gonna get into that too.
Oh yeah. Fun. And so it was just, and then lots of dramas, very big dramas, at the various churches I served at. So what happened real quickly was that as we sought the Lord and consulted with brothers that we loved and respected, including one was Paul Johansson, we felt the sense from the Lord was to live by faith and do this itinerant ministry where I would minister on the road to all ages, either separately or combined, with a special focus on whole family services where, because of the giftings and the anointings the Lord has given me, He's graced me to be able to keep the attention from children up to senior citizens and stuff them with scripture and theology in a very dramatic and visual way. And so that's what I've been doing. But it encompasses youth retreats, camps, even addictions ministries, retreat, you name it, we do it.
And this is the itinerant ministry.
This is itinerant ministry that
you said about
24 years. And the Lord impressed my heart was when He said, "You take care of my people, and I'll take care of you," as far as provision, and He has. And so it's been a real honor, and I'm doing what I feel I was made to do. So.
And I love that every time you post on Facebook when you're off to a camp or you have your truck, you have your special setup in the truck. And
Sure do.
I was bragging about even this equipment in a hotel room.
Yeah.
You have to pack it in a perfect way, but I think I kind of got that seeing you.
Yep.
Knowing the way. And so tell us a little bit about where you're based, a little bit about your wife, and then we'll dive into
All right, well, I got to tell you something about packing the truck that you've seen so many times.
Right.
Is that I've likened the way I pack my truck, covered with a silver tarp and a bunch of bungee cords. It so much looks like the Grinch's sled when he took all the things out of Whoville. It really does. So even at least once when I posted a picture that I was heading somewhere and I was all packed up, I had an actual picture of how the Grinch Stole Christmas. This is the cartoon version of his sled right next to my truck. And it's ironic because when I was in high school in South Jersey, a dear friend of mine, his dad, he found out from my friend that I like to watch children's Christmas specials, and here I was a football player.
Right.
And he started, you're the Grinch. And ever since this friend's father, who was a football coach at another high school, he called me that. That was my nickname in high school, was Grinch.
The Grinch.
Because
right.
of that.
Because
and I still love to watch children's Christmas specials.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And Easter specials.
So I tell you what we're going to look for in your story, though. That exact moment where your heart grew 3 sizes that day and broke that little heart where you bought it.
You definitely will.
So where are you based now? And
we live in Wilmington, Delaware since 1996, and it's a beautiful thing because prior to moving to Delaware, to Wilmington, Kim and I had moved 14 times in 19 years of marriage.
Right, 14 times in 19 years. So that's
Yes.
once every year and a quarter or so.
Virginia, New York, a number of places in New York, and then Ohio, then Pennsylvania, and then here. So we are so happy to stay in the same place we never thought it would be 28 years next month, but
Wow.
it's been a real blessing, big time.
And how many kids do you have?
I have 3, Kim has 4. I'm her 4th.
Yeah.
And praise the Lord, all 3 of our children, they all went to Elim.
Yeah.
And our oldest son's a pastor in Cleveland. And our youngest, or our only daughter, she and her husband are in ministry in Alabama. They were in missions work for 8 years. And then now our son-in-law, Nathan, his parents pastored the church that Gloria Johansson grew up in.
Oh, fun.
So Nathan, and he's the missions pastor at his church in Alabama as of last October. Then our youngest son, Caleb, he lives in Wilmington near us, and he's very involved in worship leading, along with his wife Elizabeth, and has written tons of songs, and I had the privilege for a season to drum for him.
Yeah.
Record with him. So Caleb lives on the other side of town, but he's a graphic designer by profession.
So Cleveland, Wilmington, and
Alabama.
So does that get you on the road?
It does. The last 3 years, we call it our triangle trip. We drive from Wilmington to Alabama and to see our daughter, and then from Alabama to Cleveland, and then Cleveland back home. It's roughly about 2,500 miles in 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
But that's what you do when most of your grandkids are out of town, so it's worth it.
Yeah.
We'll hope to do it again for the 4th time this October.
Oh, fun.
So, yep.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that truck.
No, we don't take the truck on that.
Okay.
We take our car, but I'd much rather take the truck. It has a lot more room.
Yeah.
But.
Oh, beautiful. Well, okay. So let's dive in. Well, we're gonna like I said, tell you a story. We're gonna go through the rabbit trails, and I love that. I'm a huge Christmas special person. You know, myself. I always have to have my seasonal. Sit down with the family. But well, let's start with speaking of children. Let's start with. Well, even your childrenhood, or even beyond that, what was the story of your family that got you to where you are? Where did it begin?
My grandparents on my mother's side, my maternal grandparents, are from North Jersey, and then my father's.
I'm sorry?
North Jersey?
No, I heard you. I'm just sorry.
Oh yeah, there you go. Where I was born, by the way, in Pequannock, New Jersey. Most people haven't heard of it, but because my mother was from that area, and her parents, of course, and then Dad was from near Oswego, New York area. Okay. So,
and of course, I'm just kidding. It's sort of fun to make fun
I
of
thought
Jersey.
I thought you were messing with me.
I was.
Sadly, my dad's dad walked out on the family when I would guess Dad was about 14 or so, and maybe 15. But anyway,
so you never met your paternal
maybe when I was a child. Of course, when I was an infant, and then I think when I was a child. Those are the 2 times. Of course, I don't remember him as an infant, but when I was about maybe 10 years old, he came to the house, and other than that. We didn't know him, and so he had told my dad when Dad was younger that you'll never amount to anything, and but Dad super refuted that, and was an amazing man, and so. And then my dad was on the ground floor of computers in America, and so he was. This is later in the story, but he was the director of the computer center for the University of Pennsylvania. And so anyway, my mother's father was a milkman, he was a mailman, and he was a fireman. So going to see Pop.
Right. And this is all in North Jersey. Milkman, fireman,
and a mailman.
Mailman, wow.
And so when my brother Jimmy and I, when we were really young, he'd have to get in his truck and go to the ice house, and he would shovel ice into the bed of the truck. And then he would go to the dairy, and he'd get these glass bottles of milk. And so Jimmy and I, when it was time to, the ice was, of course, in the milk, all around the milk. And then when we'd go to deliver, he would have Jimmy and I stand on the running boards. And then Pop would say, take this to them. So Jimmy and I would run out to the sides, and so we would start like 3 a.m. And so when we got, the next morning when we woke up, like Pop might give us a dime or a quarter, and we thought it was all the money in the world.
Right. So would you say that was your first real job?
That was my first real job.
As a milk boy, milkman.
Yeah, working for Pop. And this might turn you and the hearers off, but it's very, very precious to me, is that if I'm driving late at night on the road and I smell a skunk, of course, most people are like repulsed by it, but to me, it's a very, very precious memory. Instantly sends me back to helping Pop deliver milk in the middle of the night on his Chevy truck, because I remember that happening when Jimmy and I were doing that. So it's just one of those little, you asked for rabbit.
Yeah, those smells that sort of instantly. I think they say it's like your smell. Goes right to you.
It sure does. Well, this was a skunk trail, not a rabbit trail, but it's just a fond memory of those days. And then when we would go to Pop's with my siblings and I would go there, he lived near a lake, Packanack Lake, and he would have all this wood in his garage, and he would let us build these boats. And that we take him down to the lake and float him, and his house was a wonderland. We were growing up in suburban South Jersey, so to go to North Jersey, where Pop's and Graham's yard was very big and wooded to some extent, it was a wonderland for us. So, and very fond memories of Packanack Lake. And,
now, and you were saying, so you had a brother. What other siblings? Did you grow up with?
Jimmy's the oldest, and then Katie, and then myself, and then Colette, Colleen, and Celeste. And my siblings might refute this, but I want to recollect decades ago, Mom had told me she had 3 miscarriages, so we would have had 9 children, a big Catholic family. Right. And I want to say Mom told me many years ago that she had a miscarriage before me and after me. Maybe one of my siblings would know better, but that's what I recollect. Wow. And I don't know how many they would have had, but at the time, I don't know what the Catholic Church teaches now, but of course you weren't allowed to use contraceptives. Right. So big Catholic family.
Yeah. So it was your parents' heart to have a big family, even bigger than you had.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if they had a choice in the matter, because they were very strongly Catholic. So. And I was named after a priest, one of Dad's friends from Catholic University in D.C. that Dad went to school with, and dedicated to Mary as a baby, and went to Catholic school for 8 years, altar boy, and they wanted to send me to an all-boys Catholic high school. And I whined for about 2 weeks, and they let me go to a public school. I like girls too much, so I said, come on. And now, in ways, I wish I would have gone to the all-boys Catholic school, high school, but anyway.
Yeah. What would have been different?
I think it was a better school, and also, I don't know, they had a better football team. But anyway.
So how did your parents meet? You said your dad was living in New York?
Yeah, he's from Oswego. And it's very fond childhood memories of Oswego, too. But he... and his mother was a school teacher, taught elementary school for decades.
But he grew up Catholic, too.
Oh, yeah. And so he... and again, some of my siblings are so much more up on this info than I am, but I want to recollect that Mom and Dad were working at the same company, and I think in North Jersey, and Mom was a secretary, if I remember right, and that's how they met. I could be wrong on that, but that's my recollection. Right. And so when they got married, they lived in North Jersey, and we're in the region where I was born. And then
so near your maternal grandparents then.
Right. Yeah.
So what was it like growing up Catholic? How did that impact you?
It's all I knew, and I don't even think I was ever in a non-Catholic church till I was in high school in Missouri. And some friends of mine from high school took me to a Baptist church, and I was like, had never been in not a Catholic. I didn't know what to do, and they were all cracking up watching Gertie, like.
Where do you stand? When do you sit? Why are you?
Yeah, they were just watching like me react. If I remember right. So, but it was I don't know. We did. I didn't dislike going to Mass. Of course, we went every Sunday. On the rare times I would skip, though of course I didn't tell my parents. And then in Catholic school, we also had Mass once a week. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to be an altar boy was to so you could see the girls and the girls could see you.
Oh, yeah.
It was very holy.
You'd be up front.
Yep. Very
visual.
holy. Yeah. And when we were preparing for Mass before the priest came in the back room when we were getting our vestments on, cassocks and surplice and whatnot,
right.
We would sometimes, it was an early morning Mass, I remember just digging my hand into the box of hosts and just eating them. And of course, don't worry, Catholic friends, they were not consecrated yet.
Right.
But I think
transubstantiation didn't happen till later in the
Right. It didn't happen until later in the Mass.
So it was just crackles at that point.
Yep. And I think I was an altar boy at 2 of my cousins' weddings. I had 27 first cousins on my dad's side.
27?
And 6 on my mother's side, so 33 first cousins.
How many siblings did your dad have?
He had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Okay. Dad was the third. Forgive me, he was the second oldest of the 5.
Right, wow.
Yep. So, and I look very much like Dad. I see a lot of personality similarities between Dad and me, and
what was your relationship with God as a kid?
I don't know. I didn't really think about it much. We just went to Mass and did the same thing every single time, and we, pray all the prayers. And I didn't. I don't know. I was so into, all I cared about basically were girls and sports and music. That I can remember. And we would go to midnight Mass as a family, of course. And I don't remember any traumatic things that I disliked about it. It was just, we just did it, and for decades, and so this will be later on in the story. But then, amazing what happened later on in the upper teenage years that totally radically changed all that. But the childhood was wonderful. Growing up in South Jersey, and we moved originally lived in Pennsauken, New Jersey, and we had and just fond memories of playing in the backyard for years with Tonka trucks in the dirt. That was just like my childhood, and I still go back to those days many times. And then when I was 7.5, we moved to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which was a new development outside of Philadelphia. And
what motivated the move?
I think we just needed a bigger house. And so this is when Dad was working for the computer center for the University of Pennsylvania, and he had a house. They had different models in this subdivision, Kings Park, but he had a custom-built house, so to speak. It was one of the models, but he had an extra bedroom added onto it. So because there were 6 children, we had 5 bedrooms.
Right.
So Dad had an extra bedroom built above the garage for my brother and me. And so we moved there and just had a wonderful childhood of just playing all kinds of sports and just doing tons of family stuff together. And we were a very tight Catholic family. We, of course, we had all our struggles like everybody does, but even to this day, all of my siblings and I, we've had a group text thread for years.
Yeah.
So virtually every single day, all of the siblings were in touch. In fact, while I was trying to get ready for this morning, the sibs were shooting tons of stuff back and forth that I couldn't enter into because I was trying to get ready. But so we just, we're just tight, And
that's beautiful. Are they still in the area, or are they spread out?
My oldest brother Jimmy's in South Jersey. He's lived in Morristown, near where we grew up, for 40 years in that area. Katie, she's in Missouri because she married a man from Missouri, decades ago. So she's out there. Right. Of course, we're in Wilmington. My younger sister Colette lives in Herndon, Virginia, outside of D.C. And then the sister after her, who happened to be born on the same day but a year apart, Colleen, she lives right next door to Colette.
Oh, really?
Yep. And then Celeste, the baby, she lives with Colette. So
Okay.
so it's kind of cool having three sisters right next
You
door.
go visit them all
Yep.
at once.
All at once.
That's
Very
beautiful.
convenient.
And what's
So-
fun too is when they sit down to listen to this all. If they're anything like my family, they'll be taking notes and you got this wrong.
Yep. And every one of the sisters, I've often said, every one of them can whoop me.
Yeah.
And they're all so different and so unique, and I love each of them, and just I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a special relationship with each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then and Jimmy being the oldest and my only brother. Jimmy would kill for me. Everybody loves Jimmy. And even Kim, my wife, said years ago that the perfect husband would be Jimmy and Michael mixed together.
Oh yeah, taking the best of both.
Yes. And
how much older than you is he?
3.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And,
kind of the big brother. all
he's
the
the
way
big
through.
brother. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Now you were telling me before that. How did you phrase it? You felt like you were always sort of a kid in an adult body, And I think that sort of is a testament to having a wonderful childhood. So and it sounds just like we had family, you had church, you had holidays.
Yep.
And what are some other memories you have that really sort of made that childhood special?
No, just I was sharing with you before we went on the air that I've described myself for years as I feel like I'm a little boy trapped inside a man's body who very much wants to stay a little boy, and I don't know how to grow up. I really don't. I don't know how to act my age, and whatever that's supposed to mean. And so I don't know. I'm still a child inside in many ways, and I'm sure I need to mature in many ways. But so it was just, in a sense, an ideal childhood, and we were protected. And I still remember at times, I remember the individuals who brought, how do I say this, who invaded, so to speak, our bubble and brought, I don't know what word to use, but brought the wickedness of the world, so to speak, into our bubble. I still remember the individuals, and that before that happened, we just had this, in my perception, in my recollection, we just, we're just this, had this, in a sense, in this bubble to some degree. And then there were certain people who just brought in like certain worldly music that we never heard before. We would just, and another guy in the neighborhood, I had never heard anyone curse like that, and he would hang out and play football and sports with us and stuff. And then another relative, they just brought me as a young teenager into areas of sin I didn't know existed, so to speak, and I was like, wow, and it happens with every family.
Right. But what I hear you saying is before that there was sort of a protected, beautiful
it was
area childhood.
It was. Dad took lots of home movies with a Super 8 camera with no sound, and we have tons of them of years gone by, and still the Christmas tree with the tinsel on it and the C9 light bulbs. I still love C9 light bulbs, the big ones, and I bought 3 boxes of them this past Christmas because they remind me of my childhood. There's a neighbor across the street in Delaware. Every year, you putting up your C9s? Every year he puts them up around his door because it reminds me of Dad, and that's what Dad would put on our Christmas tree, so it's kind of an ongoing thing with the neighbor and me. So
that's sort of fun.
It was.
So, and you said you started to get into sports and music and girls. So we'll talk about the girls later. But the sports and music, what was your interest? We'll start with the music. What got you into?
I had a cousin, we were listening to music before this, but this cousin, he took up drums when he was a teen. And I was probably about 3 years younger than him, and we went to Oswego, New York, where he lived, and he had this black diamond drum set, and I was just mesmerized, and I would watch him play, and that's what sparked it in me. And so,
and how, you were a teenager at this time?
Yeah, I was a young teen, and so I just got mesmerized with drums, and then Mom and Dad bought me a Blue Sparkle snare. I think it was a Christmas present, and I would sit on the edge of one of our beds in my brother and mine's room, and I would just have a record player in the closet, and I had a brush and a stick, and I would just play.
So just the snare, not the whole
Just the
kit.
snare, but at 8th grade graduation, Mom and Dad bought my cousin's drum set from him for my 8th grade graduation.
Oh, okay.
And I assume that he got another set. I don't know. But, and that's what started it. And so drums, I would just play down in the basement, and practice, and wound up being in a band when I was probably a freshman in high school.
So you were self-taught at this point?
Right, self-taught. Yep, never took lessons, and in fact, in high school in South Jersey, I would tap so much that my French teacher threw a book at me.
Yeah,
not in anger. She, Monsieur Guertin, please stop tapping. And it wasn't because she was mad, but I'm sure I was distracting her. But it was that kind of thing.
But you had it in your soul.
Had it in my soul, and constantly, believe it or not, this is going to really sound weird, but I constantly will play drum beats and with my teeth. Believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. The way I knock my dentist probably have a nightmare, but I've been doing it for decades when I'm just playing a drum beat.
Some
with my
people
teeth.
grind their teeth.
Yep, play drum beats with them. Yep. And so I just, and then so we were in a band, freshman year, and probably sophomore year too. And then before we moved to Missouri, and that changed everything. And I don't know when you want to get to that, but or stay in the childhood first. But yes, love drums. We would constantly have pickup football games and play behind the Catholic school where we went to school, and just never play enough football.
So was this just with you and your friends?
Yep, me and my friends, our gang, and we couldn't play up at the school. Sometimes I just play one-on-one out in our front yard with a friend who I recently connected with after 40-something years.
Oh, wow.
And just play against him. We just play one-on-one, and just never play enough football. Play stickball, played baseball, farm league, little league. Babe Ruth played baseball in high school. Played baseball. Some ice hockey. Loved ice hockey when we could play it. And trying to think what other sports, but those were the things you couldn't get enough of. So music and sports, and of course, how do you not like girls when the cooties go away and girls start to look attractive?
You have a choice between an all-boys high school and a regular one that has both sports, music, and girls. So I can see your dilemma there.
Yep. And the first girl I kissed was when I was 6 years old. we were in her driveway sitting on chairs, and we were both very, very young, and they lived across the street, and I just remember giving her a kiss. Michelle Folks, I remember her name. And anyway, but you know how it is with all young guys. All of a sudden, girls don't have cooties anymore. Right. They're like, wow, she's cute. And I think the first... Yeah, I'm trying to think. First girl I think I remember really liking was in Catholic grade school, and dancing with her at a dance. And first public drum performance was at the same Catholic grade school. And the first
was it? You're saying in 8th grade?
It might have been younger than that, but around that time. And the first public performance of drumming was on my Blue Sparkle snare for the grade school. Christmas grade school production of Little Drummer Boy, and that was when I had my first public performance.
And you were the drummer boy,
Little Drummer Boy. Yep.
Right. So you're living in Jersey, and you were saying Missouri became a move. So when did that happen?
So after having this wonderful, childhood and
kind of the bubble you were describing.
And again, we had problems. We had what siblings go through, and we had family conflicts and stuff, and with drugs entering the family, and here and there, and so just like every family in the 60s was doing, and and there would be conflicts, but we still stayed together. But anyway, and I'll never in 1972 never forget it, my uncle, who was my father's youngest brother, he had 7 children.
Wow.
And he was running a mountain and beach resort in southeastern Missouri, 90 miles southeast of St. Louis, with a partner. And so his partner and his wife got together. And so my uncle, of course, was broken, and he came to South Jersey and asked my dad to be his new partner, which meant selling the custom-made 5-bedroom house and leaving the computer center at the University of Pennsylvania. Wow. And so I'll never forget it as long as I live. So, because they had 7 children and we had 6, the parents sent us to the movies to get us out of there so they could talk.
Right.
And
so
so
this would have been a big paradigm shift for your dad,
Huge.
going for
oh yeah, yep. And so
computers to
yes, running a mountain and beach resort.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget it. We went to this movie theater in South Jersey in Cherry Hill, and we watched the Ten Commandments.
the 10 Commandments.
And my dear,
a
I'd never
nice
seen
long movie, so they could have a nice long
Yep,
talk.
yep.
Right?
And I had never seen it.
Really?
And so anyway, we're sitting in the movie theater, and I recollect that some of my siblings, at least, and cousins were getting bored and fidgety, but I was like, I was so mesmerized and awed. It was the first time I ever remember God starting to draw me, that I could remember. I was just like, and they wanted to leave, and I just like was blown away.
What about it spoke to you?
I don't know, the awe and the spectacle, and I don't remember what's any particular scene, but with God, and they, of course we heard about it in religion in Catholic school, and of course every single mass we went to, but to see it on the big screen,
It's coming alive.
Oh, my
and
dear.
Of course, Charlton Heston's a
Yep,
classic.
Yep. So what happened was that Dad decided to do it, and so basically he told me and my 3 younger sisters, I was 16 at the time, that we're moving to Missouri. And so, well, why not Jimmy and Katie, the 2 oldest? Well, they were both in colleges, and so, so because I was still under Dad's roof and
Right.
the 3 younger, so.
Wow. So this would have been the first time the family was split up.
That's right, yep.
Wow.
So I want to say that Jimmy had already gone off to college because he graduated from high school in 1970.
Right.
So he was in college, but
But still college in the area, I'm assuming.
I know he went to the University of Illinois. He went to the University
okay.
of Wisconsin,
Okay.
and then Kate was going to Glassboro in South Jersey. And so what happened was Mom and Dad took me out of high school my sophomore year early. It was in May of 1972, and Dad and I drove out to Missouri in his little Dodge Dart with a U-Haul trailer, and we put a player piano, which we had in the family for many, many years, and it was like the player piano in the Guertin family was like part of the family.
Really?
So we had countless neighborhood and family relative get-togethers, and they'd sing around the piano.
Oh, beautiful! And it would have the tracks that would.
Yep, the rolls,
that's fun.
And it was just part of our family. And so anyway, so we took it with us. So
that might have been a precursor to your truck packing,
maybe. Well, I don't remember loading it, but I definitely remember that trip with Dad. And so he and I drove through the night. And so, well, why did he take me out of school early? Because Uncle Jack, his younger brother who was running the place, he needed help now. And so for the summer season coming. So I went out there with Dad and drove through the night. And so when we arrived there, basically, Dad left me there, of course, and flew back to New Jersey, of course, to be with Mom and the girls until they moved out in July. Okay. So I was there
So it was just you and your uncle.
Me and my uncle, and believe it or not, we moved from that custom-built 5-bedroom house in Cherry Hill, which is a really nice suburb at the time still of Philly, to the basement of a liquor store.
Wow.
It was made out of cinder block. In the part we lived in, it was the basement. Of course, the liquor store was above us, and that's all my uncle had at the time.
Right.
And so when I got
So you
there,
didn't actually stay on the resort itself?
No. And so this was on the lake, and it was called G&T Resort, Guertin and Thomas. Thomas was my uncle's former partner.
Right.
And so there was the Mountain and Beach Resort at one end of the lake where guests from St. Louis and who knows where would come for a week, stay in a cabin, and then in the middle of the lake was where the liquor store was, and then at the other end of the lake were property owners. So people wanted to build their own home. Uncle Jack had this. They would build homes for them.
Right.
So it was a 3-entity thing, so to speak. So anyway, one of the main things I had to do was paint the whole basement of the liquor store because it needed to be painted.
Right. So what do you remember your thoughts? You being put out of school, being put out of where you grew up. You're now living in the basement as opposed to a custom house. Do you remember
at the time, maybe when you're 16, maybe it's an adventure.
Yeah.
We all love.
You tend to either do one of the two things. You either resent it or you say, "Oh, this is going to be an adventure."
There were definitely struggles. I mean, it was really hard in a lot of ways, and And I'll never forget when we went back to Cherry Hill for a visit. I don't know, maybe a year later, whatever it was. I remember kissing the ground when I got back to Cherry Hill. But I painted, I painted the bottom floor. And Mom and Dad slept upstairs behind the liquor store, and there was a bathroom up there. But the three girls and my youngest sister, I believe, slept upstairs in a bedroom upstairs behind the liquor store. But the other two girls and I slept in the basement. There were scorpions in the basement. I stepped on one time, and thank the Lord, his stinger didn't get me. But I set up my drums down there, so I would be playing my drums while I was living there and painting and stuff, whatever. So that's what we moved into, and. I don't know how far you want to go, but and then I went to a high school in Cherry Hill West in South Jersey, which is a very big high school. I don't know how many, thousands of students, whatever, to a very small rural high school for my last 2 years, and much smaller. But because we were from the East, because I played football, and they didn't have a football team at the high school in Missouri, and I was crushed. And we were just outsiders and newcomers from the East. We kind of, I don't know what the word is, kind of grew in popularity kind of quickly.
So you're kind of the outside, but you became famous because of that.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah, we just did. And I have to admit, I remember being kind of humiliated living in the basement of a liquor store, and so even not a Christian yet, it was revealing pride, that where we used to live. And
right.
And but so I couldn't play, so I was like, what am I going to do? They don't have a football team here. I don't play basketball. And that was the main sport of the school. And almost like the movie Hoosiers, the basketball players were like gods, almost. Right. And so what am I going to do? So I did play baseball for them, but I even started I asked the powers that be if we could do a floor hockey mini game during halftime of the basketball game. And I guess my pride, I wanted some of the action of the spotlight of the basketball players.
Something you did well.
We did, and the crowds that went nuts because we were not banging into each other, slamming each other, so we soaked it up big time. But anyway, but also, I played drums for the band, so I was in marching band. But also, I had my trap set, the set I bought, my parents bought for my cousin. I set it up at the school. So one time I was just cranking music in this side room off the stage and just playing my heart out. And one of the guys at the high school who was an upperclassman, I think he was a senior at the time, who was an amazing guitarist. His dad used to play for a big band. I forget, it wasn't Danny Kaye, but something like that. But anyway, he heard me playing, and he told some of the other musicians, he sounds like the drummer for Johnny Carson. And so they asked if I would be their drummer for this band they were forming called Roscoe Cheer. So we were like the town's, band. And they had another band from the town too, but we were, so to speak, like the town's band.
So what would you play for? What sort of events?
Dances, and mostly dances, and gigs like that. We had a manager. And so, I don't know, it was, how do I explain this? I've often said that those 2 years we were in Missouri, in the middle of nowhere, were the richest years of my life in the world. It was one adventure after another, both in town and at the school, but also I could easily spend a couple hours just talking about those 2 years. But at the Mountain and Beach Resort, my cousins and I, the boys, we would take care of the horses. We'd go out and get the horses in the morning so the guests could ride them.
Right.
And we'd get bait for the customers. We'd rent boats. So the boys did that kind of stuff. But the girls, my sisters and my girl cousins, they would wear these, I think they're called gingham. They're like the cross-check dresses with the blouses underneath, and they would serve in the dining hall. Okay. And so work in the kitchen, and they would clean cabins. And so boys would also...
So it was really a big family.
It was. And all kinds of adventures. And I wouldn't trade them for anything, despite not being in the kingdom of God yet. But it was so rich, one adventure after another. So it made Cherry Hill almost seem like lackluster because of things... I could jump all over the place, but one of the my cousin Jackie and he's the one who taught me how to ride horses and all about horses.
So, because you guys actually had the horses.
We had the horses people would bring them and let us use them. I think we owned some of them. But Jackie taught me everything I knew about horses when I first got there, and he handed me the reins of a horse to hold it while he had to do something, and the horse just jerked his head, and it scared me. I had to let him go. And I was, South Jersey suburbs. But anyway, by the time I was done, Jackie had me, I think, jump off a bridge on a horse. The horse gave me attitude. I punched the horse in the nose. Wow. And Jackie had me raising up. And the cool thing about this was that decades later, when I started doing summer camps at Telhai Camp, where I've been since 1991 and still there, for 21 years I did field dramas on horseback, equestrian dramas that... anything from gladiators to Civil War to Lord of the Rings to biblical epics, and it was all because Jackie taught me how to ride horses. So who would have known as an unsaved teenager at 16, learning about horses, that the Lord would use it years later?
And I think that's what's so fun about doing this is when we look back at your childhood or even your parents, you could see the building blocks of what God starts putting into play.
And you speaking about that, I have to go back to something. Growing up in Cherry Hill, one thing Dad would not let us do, and I'm so grateful he didn't, we were not allowed to watch television during the week, during the school year. And of course we felt, oh, Dad, come on. And we felt so embarrassed compared to our students and friends, who basically they all could.
Yeah. What was his motivation for that?
Because he just saw it as a distraction, and that it would hurt our studies and I think he was right. And I am so grateful now that Dad did. Why? You'd have to find something to do after dinner, and so I would go in the garage and build things, and that translated into decades of, almost 20 years of Via Dolorosa, which is our massive Easter production we did, where I would build my own armor, weapons, shields, costumes. I would build object lessons to minister to children. Right.
And this is like metal walk and leather walk.
And but also just finagling things like little object lessons for children and adults. I use them for adults. So I really attribute that to Dad, not letting us, and it caused you to have to be creative. And the other thing, I remember one of the most popular shows during that era when we weren't allowed to watch TV was The Monkees, and only one of the Monkees is still alive right now. But anyway, so when I think the Monkees came on like Tuesday nights, and of course when you went to school, we would line up in the parking lot outside the Catholic grade school before we went in. So you'd be in your lines, and of course everybody be talking about the Monkees. Right. And we were so embarrassed that I don't know about
the water cooler talk. Right?
Yeah, but I don't know about my sisters, but I was felt so embarrassed that I couldn't talk about it. So what I would do is hear a couple stories about the Monkees from some classmates. Then in the next group, I acted like I'd seen it. Yep, pass it on. So. But again, I can't thank Dad enough that he did that, because I really see, again, in God's providence and sovereignty, he used that discipline Dad put on us, not to mention his belt, but it caused, thank you, Lord, it caused this creativity. And so anyway, that I've used for decades and still do. I'm always working on something.
What would you make as a kid in the garage?
I remember building a big dollhouse, and I would play with slot cars, those Tyco slot cars, and I had one of those Stingray bicycles that we all had in that day. But I made my fork so long, like a chopper, that it was so long I couldn't ride it. So I tried to ride it up the street, but just stuff like that. You had to do something, because you couldn't watch TV, and so. And so that was precious. But so back to Missouri, like my cousin Jackie, he and I were always getting in trouble. I feel so terrible for Dad and Uncle Jack, because we were knuckleheads. But Dad and Uncle Jack bought this used power wagon. It was a Dodge pickup truck for the camp. Right. As soon as we got it, Jackie and I took it up on the horse trail, and just driving it around the horse trail. We're just knuckleheads. We would race with John boats along the lake, but we would, to reduce wind resistance, we would lay down in the boat and steer with our foot, so and
to see how fast you could get.
See how fast we could go. But at one time in the night, I turned too sharp with my foot, and my boat submerged with the motor on it. And I was terrified. Still from South Jersey, I thought every like snapping turtle was coming for me.
Right.
You know, I was terrified. And of course, Jackie rescued me. But a major thing that happened on my 18th birthday, Mom and Dad went back east because Dad was now looking into working for his other brother, his older brother, in Virginia. Okay. So on my 18th birthday, my best friend and I skipped school. And we went out to the lake. At the end of the lake was a dam, a 35-foot dam that formed the lake. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, what would happen in high water when we had a lot of rain, it would leave debris and trees and branches on the dam. So my buddy, Paul Meese, whom I called Meese, we skipped school and we went to the dam and we started throwing the stuff off the top of the dam, you know. I was making believe it was my girlfriend at the time's ex-boyfriend who I was jealous of. And he was a nice guy, but I was just...
You were taking out your aggression on that.
just joking around, because he was always a nice guy to me, but, you know, I don't know if I was just playing around. But so here you go, pal. And so this big tree, I tipped it, and it started sliding off the dam, and so I'm leaning over the dam, watching it to drop. I didn't realize there was a branch on it coming up behind me.
Oh, no.
So it knocked me off the dam 35 feet.
All the way down.
All the way down, and I fell, and I landed on my rear end, and thank the Lord there was a little water on top of the rock ledge that my rear end hit, but I bounced off of it into the water at the bottom of the dam.
Right.
And I'm the only person I know in the history of that lake for a century that ever fell off the dam. And so what happened? I was terrified, and so I'm scattering out of the pool and you know, trying to get to land, and I'm going meese, 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 and. So I ran all the way down.
But you were okay.
As far as I was too scared not to know if I was all right. So I ran all the way to our house. Now, by this time, we had gotten out of the liquor store, and my uncle found us a house on the lake that we were renting.
Right.
So I ran to the house, and my big sister Katie, she happened to be visiting. So, you know, I was scared to death that I had a 7-foot open gash on my rear end.
Right. So you didn't even know.
I didn't even know. I was too paranoid. And so I don't care. You're my sister. So I pulled my pants down to see, am I bleeding? Am I bleeding? And Kate goes, well, I just see a scratch there. So,
wow.
So anyway, but again, I didn't know God. If I would have died, I was done.
Because it could have been your head.
Yep, I could have died. Yeah. And so I just once again saw the grace of God, the keeping grace of God, the keeping and the mercy. And he spared me. And he didn't have to. And he shouldn't have.
Right.
And so anyway, you just see the providence of God working through your life before he introduces himself to you. Mm-hmm. And that was another one.
No, but where was Meese during all this?
He scurried back. He was still on top of the dam.
Right.
But, you know, of course, he scurried back with me back to the house. And
but you didn't feel to moon him to see if you were...
No, I don't know. I was so scared. I was just trying to get back to the house. And again, forgive me, I'm jumping around time-wise, but another thing, playing with this band, which happened to be called Roscoe Cheer, that it was an imaginary band that this guy, the electric guitarist who I told you was so gifted, he had written a song of an imaginary rock group called Roscoe Cheer. So he gave the name to our band. And so anyway, you know, we get paid some for gigs and stuff. But one time we went to play at this place in Viburnum, Missouri, in the middle of nowhere, at some dance. And on the way back, we had a roadie. He was the guy who helped set up and unpack everything. We were in his convertible Mustang, and in the middle of the night, after we had been at a party, after the gig, his car ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere in the woods. And it was horrifically cold in the middle of winter. So here we are, all the band members.
And he was in a convertible?
The convertible. It was a ragtop. It was up, of course.
So it was up.
Well, yeah, but still, you know, so here we are. There were no cell phones then.
Right.
So we were in the middle of the night just trying to huddle together to stay warm, and there was nobody out there. So we were there the whole night. And I thought, I can't stand this anymore. Wow. And all of a sudden, a logging truck went by. And so, you know, he stopped. I'm sure we were waving him down, and he had a little gas, you know, in a gas can on his truck. But Dad, of course, had the police looking for me because he had no idea what happened.
And there's nobody to phone. There's nobody
to phone. No, and so it was that was an incident too. But around that time, I was getting tired of the band life, and so Dad, he told me I couldn't be in the band anymore, and I was glad he did. It gave me an excuse to blame Dad when the band members got mad that I was quitting.
Right, you could blame him.
But
what was his motivation?
Well, because of stuff like this, he didn't know where I was, and it was nice that he cared enough about me that he told. But I was so glad. I even said, Dad, I'm so glad you're keeping your foot down, because I want to get out anyway.
Right.
So it was really a real blessing in that,
because it was really rescuing you.
Yep, rescuing me, and I was getting disillusioned with it all, and I think now, I really believe that the Lord again was working on me, because after band, I think we had band at high school. The last, I think it was 8th period, the last class of the day. I still vividly remember this. When all the students left, I was the only one on the stage in the high school, sitting in the back, and I remember sitting there just thinking, is this what life is all about? You just go to school, and then you go to college, and you just try to get a good life and make a lot of money in the American dream, and that's it? Is that what it's all about? And I'm sure that was the Spirit of God beginning to draw me and put thoughts of eternity and what is life about. I'll never forget it. And the other thing that contributed to the Lord's process of drawing me was my girlfriend at the time. I kept trying to find, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was trying to find the love of God from her. And I didn't trust her. And other times, I don't know, in the early part of the relationship, like I told you, I was jealous of her former boyfriend, and I just felt like she flirted with him too much. So I really wanted to attach myself to her, but I just felt like she was being unfaithful. Right. And I didn't know I was looking for the love of God, of course. I just was. And so the relationship was going back and forth, and just constant, pain and hassle, and again, I believe all of this was the seedbed of God preparing me to manifest His love to me, and it was spheres apart.
Yeah. And what was that old song? Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah. And that's what it was. And so, and again, like I said, there were so many adventures of at the Mountain and Beach Resort, precious memories you'll never forget. But roughly, we're up to the point, I guess, technically, of the conversion part, if you want to keep going.
What happened next?
Well, what happened next? So this was the life we had, and then there was a Catholic organization that I still think exists called Teens Encounter Christ, TEC, called TEC for short. And in our diocese, in our parish, in this small town in Missouri, they would have retreats, separate retreats for high school girls and boys, and I think it was only for juniors and seniors. So I think they had, I don't remember which one they had first, but when it was time for the boys' retreat, I don't know. I wanted to go, and I wasn't looking for Jesus. I wasn't spiritual, like I told you. I told you what I cared about: girls and sports and cars and music, or not, whatever.
And at that point, it seemed like all of that and the adventures, you sort of had a little bit of everything.
Nothing else to do. I don't know. Might as well go. Right. And again, I didn't feel any strange drawing to it. And again, I wasn't looking for Jesus. And so anyway, Mies, my buddy who was at the dam with me, and my best friend, I was trying to get him to go with me, and I kept bugging him, come on, man, just go, would you? And he kept saying, nah, I don't want to. And now I know why the Lord didn't have him go, is because I am such a people person, and ultra loyal, and I attach very tightly to friends. Is the Lord knows the way I'm wired, that I would have been focused on me.
It'd be about you and him and the fun of it.
So I really believe, again, in God's providence, He didn't have me go, though I kept bugging him. So anyway, we went on this retreat, and I remember hanging out with some guys smoking pot at the retreat, and I'd smoked pot every once in a while, but I was afraid to smoke it. I didn't have enough courage to smoke it at the retreat. I think they were. So, this is where I was at spiritually. I remember vividly when we'd have meals, there were girls serving food in the cafeteria. What was I was checking the girls out, So I was really there pursuing God. And so they were, just had meetings and whatever and free time. And then one time we were in a particular service, and one of the chaperones, he was about 50 years old, and we were all at the altar. Of course, Catholic churches have an altar versus a pulpit. Well, they have a pulpit too, but the altar is the centerpiece.
Right.
So we were, all of us were up on the altar that I remember, and this chaperone was like standing in the middle, and he was crying. He was burdened about something. And so I just remember that we were holding hands and we were praying for him. And I have no idea what it was about to this day. And so while we were praying for him, I sensed like an electric current going through our arms. And I want to recollect that I was going like this, seeing if anyone else was sensing what I was sensing.
It was like a physical?
Yeah, it just felt that I remember. I just felt like a mild electric current. And so when we were done, I remember this, that I felt in my heart, you know what? I feel like, I don't know what he was praying about, but whatever it was, I kind of feel like his prayer was answered. And a grown-up Catholic, we repeated the same prayers all the time. Right. But it was the first time in my life I felt like a prayer was answered So anyway, it was lunchtime. This was March 31st, 1974. It was Sunday. And it was time to go to lunch. So we went to go to lunch. And the chapel had a side door. And as we were going to go out the side door, I just remember being stopped. I just felt like, no, just stop. All the other retreaters and the leaders kept going down this long hallway, which led to the basement where the cafeteria was, and I just stopped. And I just felt drawn to go back into the chapel and just go up and, near the altar, at the front, and just, they had a life-size crucifix there on the wall behind the altar, and I just looked up at it, and I just started to feel a sadness I'd never known. A remorse. It was, I just started to weep, and it was like, if I could articulate it, it was like the Lord was saying, Michael, you go to Mass every Sunday, but the rest of the week you live like you don't know me. Right. If I could articulate what I was feeling. Right. And so I just wept and was just like so sorrowful. Didn't say a word. I didn't know the sinner's prayer. I didn't have a Bible.
Nobody else was there? It was just
no one else was there. Nope. I never heard the sinner's prayer. I didn't know I needed to be saved. We know Catholics were baptized as infants. We're good to go. Right. As long as you don't commit a mortal sin. I don't know. We just figured we were in.
Right.
And then, like I said, didn't own a Bible. Didn't even know Jesus loves me. This I know, never heard it. My preacher father-in-law taught it to me about a year and a half later, and he was weeping, trying to teach it to me. He couldn't believe a 19-year-old had never heard that song. It was like,
But you also weren't necessarily living the truth of that up to this point.
Nope. And it wasn't like I was in God's face, like I hate you and living. I know, and we went to Mass, you know, and we just did what we did. And I always felt good after Mass. You kind of felt a little clean. You just did. But anyway, so I don't know how many minutes that went on, but I just was weeping. And all of a sudden, it was almost like scales dropped from my eyes, and I was just filled with love I'd never known, and the peace of God. And of course, I know now it was the Spirit of God.
Right.
And I just felt so filled with Him. I mean, it was like, I knew now I was born again, and couldn't say a word, didn't know how to tell anybody. All I knew was I met God. So
it sounds like just like a switch was flipped.
A switch was flipped. Yep. And so I don't know how long I was in the chapel, but it's so funny that you, like we were talking earlier, that you decided to interview me at this time in my life, because Easter Sunday, 2024 was the 50th anniversary, the Jubilee, as Kim said when she prayed for me this morning before I came, of that happening. It was 50 years ago, Easter Sunday.
And we're recording this on the 2024 in April, so that was just a few weeks ago. It was 50 years, because you're saying it was March 31st, 1974. 12
noon. I made it's on my YouTube channel. I think it's called Apprehended in a Convent, and I think when the opening scene is Michael Robert Girton's High Noon. And so anyway, I went down that long corridor and went down to the cafeteria, and they were still eating, and this is 50 years ago, I still remember what they were having. They were eating spaghetti. And I'm sitting down, and I wasn't hungry. I just sat there and tears in my eyes.
And nobody else knows what you just experienced.
Nope. And so I look over at one of the leaders. His name is Mike McBride, red hair, red mustache, and he's looking over at me, and he's crying because he knew the Lord got me.
Really?
And so I just remember the rest of the retreat, I just started hugging everybody. I didn't know how not to. It was like, that's how I knew. It's the only way I knew how to express what happened to me. And I even remember one of the retreaters telling another one, look out, here comes the hugger, but I don't know what to do. And I have been a hugger ever since.
But it was like a joy.
My dear. Yeah. And I went home and I told my dad, and I'll never forget what Dad said. Well, Michael, I went on those things when I was your age, but it'll wear off. And
sage advice.
And you know what? For many people, I'm sure it does. Right. But
which is the sad thing.
It didn't. It's a sad thing. Yeah.
But the beauty is 50 years that you're celebrating this.
It didn't wear off.
This year of Jubilee.
Year of Jubilee. I told my girlfriend at the time, and I'll never forget, she was looking at me like she saw a ghost, and she saw the Holy Ghost. Didn't know it, So, and then I told these two nuns at our parish, and I'll never forget as long as I live, when I told them what happened to me. One of them very sweetly turns to the other one and she goes, "It's the Holy Spirit." Just like that. And so, just like Jesus said, he said that the gospel would come in between families, and it did. So I saw that it came in between me and Mies, not with any animosity or hostility, but Mies was into the things that he was into, and how could I not be into this? So I saw us drift apart, and again, not with conflict at all.
Right, but you had a different perspective at this
Different perspective, and that's all I wanted to do and think about, and still didn't have a Bible. And then came in between my girlfriend and me, and that was very hard. But I knew, hallelujah, the Lord was preparing me for Kim, saving Kim for me, though of course I didn't know it.
Right.
But so that was a struggle a long time, because my flesh still wanted to hold on to her.
Right.
But definitely he came in between her and me. Then it started to divide our family, and Jesus said it would. So it basically, in the beginning, just went right down the family, and then.
And how did that happen?
Well, what happened after that was, after this happened, that was March of 1974. Then in July of 74, I believe it was, Mom and Dad and my three younger sisters, who were with me in Missouri, they moved to Northern Virginia because Dad started to work for his other brother, as I referred to earlier. Right. I stayed in Missouri. The big reason was I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay in Missouri, and so I lived with my grandparents. My maternal grandparents moved to Missouri from North Jersey to be near Mom and the family. Right. So, and a beautiful brand new house on the lake, and so I stayed with Pop and Graham.
And you were a senior in high school at this time?
I graduated, and then Mom and Dad, moved, but I just graduated. So I was taking college courses at a community college, right. A few classes during the summer. That was my excuse, but basically it was just to stay in Missouri. But I remember, again, I didn't have a Bible. I didn't have a evangelical church.
And this is 4 or 5 months after the experience.
Yeah, just a couple of, a few months. You're right, a few months. But I just remember I would listen to certain bands that, even though they weren't Christian bands, but their lyrics had meaning, and they would I wanted to listen to that kind of stuff versus all the other stuff that we used to listen to and I would jam to, because at least they had meaning, and it made me think of what really matters in life. Right. And
again, you can kind of see your priorities are starting to shift. Your focus is starting to shift.
I didn't want to go to town anymore and hang out with the gang, because different kingdoms now. I didn't understand all that. So it was just a summer with Pop and Graham. And then I eventually moved back east, and you never guess where Mom and Dad moved. They moved on Kim's street, on my future wife's street. Right. So that was.
Of course, you didn't know it.
Didn't know it. So I got there in September of 1974. Started going to George Mason University, and my major and my love was physics. I just love physics. Hated chemistry, but loved physics. So anyway. While at George Mason, I started losing desire to study physics, and the Lord was putting a desire in me to study the Bible, and so.
So safe to say, at this time, you got a Bible.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you know what? I didn't have it yet. Forgive me, but I had a motor scooter. It was a Lambretta motor scooter, something like a Vespa, that one of my dad's vice presidents of the company gave me. I painted it yellow and named him Sherman. And that's the only vehicle I had to go to George Mason, which was probably, I don't know, 7 miles away. I had to ride it in the winter.
And this was Virginia?
This is Virginia.
It's sort of interesting because I went to school in Virginia Beach, and my only vehicle was a motorcycle that I rode all winter long. So I know the pain of riding a motorcycle in Virginia.
Well, this is a motor scooter like the Singing Nun rode, Debbie Reynolds, but I used to go 60 on it on the Beltway around D.C. But so one day I was in the winter. It was snowing, and here this knucklehead me was driving Sherman. I had to go down the street right where Kim's parents lived, where Kim lived, and the scooter broke down right in front of their house. So Mom, Kim,
wait.
right in front of her house.
You could almost see, the angels at work here.
Yeah.
Pulling the spark plugs.
Yeah, and I was not Michael the Archangel by any stretch of the imagination, but so it breaks down right there. Kim's mother, she looks out the door and she starts, Lord, I just pray you'd help that young man. And she starts praying for me, and she's prayed for me ever since. But so that was during the day. That night, Kim and her brothers were sledding because it continued to snow. And so my sisters were sledding with them. And so Kim asked one of the neighborhood kids to ask me to come out and sled. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, that's how Kim and I first met, Mm-hmm. So what happened was her family took me in and started to disciple me. Mostly her mom would just teach me the Bible. And it was amazing. She would teach me scriptures, and even though I didn't have a Bible, mm-hmm. I would say, that's right. So it was kind of cool that the Spirit of the Lord was bearing witness with the truth that, of course, the Holy. So before I even had a Bible, I was like, that's right. And so let me
kind of point out that's sort of interesting with the story of your perspectives changing, because now you started to know what was I don't know, it's the Spirit of God in you, mm-hmm. saying that this is right, that was wrong, and you almost saw it before you even dove into the truth of the Bible.
Yep, and it was in her kitchen. I still remember where I was telling her, that's right, Mom, that's right. And I didn't call her Mom yet because she was a spiritual mother, but so they gave me a Bible, King James Bible, still have it, and of course I just started to eat it voraciously, and I don't know how long, and I was down there so much that it used to, kind of anger my parents. Mm. And Mom one time was going through the house going, Protestant, and my mother was a riot. She had a personality and sense of humor, but she was Protestant. And so, and we'd get into arguments because in my zeal, I would try to convert them by arguing. Of course, it never works.
Right.
And one time we had a big argument. I forget what it was about, and I was hurt and crying. I'm sitting on the steps of our house up the street from Kim's, and I hear Mom tell Dad, Jim, Michael's a jerk. But she goes, but I see an awful lot of good in him. Mm. So she saw the change, even though I was being an idiot, trying to win them to the Lord.
That kind of hurts your feeling, and also...
Yep. Thank you, Jesus. They still see you and me, Because I got in a lot of trouble of the 6 kids, But so anyway, and so that was what was going on, and then, and yet it was amazing when there was a deep need at our house. Mom or Dad would ask Kim's mother, Billy, to come up and pray. So it was so all these dynamics are going on. And then what I'd start to do is just go to meetings with Kim and her mother. Like New Adventures in Prayer was one of the biggest charismatic meetings in that region for years. Very big-time speakers would go there. Wow. And we would go every Monday night. And this is going to lead how I got to Elim. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so that's what Kim and I either we went to prayer meetings or we danced.
Okay.
Kim and I.
So were you guys dating at this time?
Thank you. So I don't know how many months it was, where basically I was just being discipled by her mom and dad until I had an interest in Kim, and she had one in me. And to be honest, the Lord had spoken to her as a young teen or a little girl that she was going to marry an evangelist and he was going to have green eyes.
Really?
Yep. And also that he also spoke to her way back then that she was going to be homeschooling. Which she did, all 3 of our children through high school. And I believe with all my heart that a major reason on the human side our 3 kids are where they are today is because Kim homeschooled them. I really do.
It's beautiful.
And I wouldn't hesitate to do it again in a second, though Kim did most of the work, but it was priceless. So,
but it was a passion she had even
Yep.
Even as a young child. You said God spoke to her.
So I guess when Kim first saw me, she realized this is the one. And
well, the green eyes, at least.
The bonehead me, and I was losing interest in George Mason, and I started dropping classes, and my heart wasn't in it, and so we were at New Adventures in Prayer one night, and so. And I think they even made me a board member of it eventually, though I was so young in the Lord. But there was one of the elders of it, one of the leaders, his name was Ralph Fry. He's still alive as far as I know. So he was standing up worshiping one night in front of Kim and her mother and me. And so Mom goes, Ralph, and he's like, yep, Michael wants to go to Bible school. And he goes, where should he go? And Ralph turns around, where else? And so Mom goes, Ralph, where? And he goes, Elim, where else? And just continues to worship the Lord. And that's what happened, the connection with Elim. Never heard of it.
Just him in passing, in the middle of worship.
Yeah, because Costa Dare had spoken at this meeting, and Judson Cornwall and whatever. So that's what sparked Elim. So
had you heard of Elim before this?
Nope, never heard of it. Yeah. And so anyway, that's how Elim came into the picture. And so Kim's mom was like the catalyst be preparing me. She either bought or made me a blue blazer. We got a briefcase because you had to wear a coat and tie at Elim back then.
Right.
All right. And I didn't mind, but I didn't have any money because I gave the money I would earn working for Dad at his factory they made printed circuit boards for computers with his older brother in Virginia.
Right.
So I would work for Dad. But anyway, I was so filled with the Lord, I would give my money away. Right. Sometimes when people give me money as a gift, I'd give it away.
Right.
And so my dad started getting mad and saying, don't give him a gift because he'll just give it away. But so when it came time to go to Elim, I didn't have any money. But I just felt like, you know what? I just felt like God was going to cover it. And he did every penny. In fact, one of Dad's business associates, if I recollect right, he started a business to make money to help me through Elim. Really? Just one of many ways that it came. Right. So it was
and let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
This is wonderful, by the way. This is great. Do you need to take a break? We're at an hour point.
I'm okay if you're okay. I'm following you.
I'm okay. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. And so, they had me all ready, and so Kim and I, we at that point before I left for Elim as a freshman, I was 20. We just felt like we were for each other, no engagement or anything like that, but we just were basically, we were the ones.
Kind of promised each other.
Yep,
now, where was she in going to Elim?
Oh yeah, and she purposely didn't go, so that she felt to be away from me. To let me be focused on the Lord alone.
Right. So even though you're still committed to each other, it was wise to have that distance to focus in.
Yep. And so I went. Elim to me was a Christian Disneyland. I'd only been saved 2 years, so I was just eating it up. And you used to have to take a test, a Bible knowledge test, before you got admitted to Elim. And I think someone told me I had the highest score ever. I had 120 out of 150 questions or something like that. And I wasn't like, I don't know. And
this is before. This is going in.
This is going into Elim. You had to take that test. I don't know if they required anymore, but I just was gorging on the Bible.
Right.
I would lay on my bed. Kim's mom took me to a Bible bookstore, and I bought these record albums. There were 8 of them, and they were called. It was a company called Cricket Records, and they made a series of children's Bible stories, and they were animated, dramatized, sound effects, music, and I bought all 8 of them. And I would lay on my bed as a 19-year-old baby Christian, infant Christian, and listen to them again and again and again with a record player. And I believe with all my heart that was the seedbed of doing time machine dramas for over 30 years. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do.
Kind of started the creative view of it.
I would just view it in my mind as I listened to it again and again. I still have them, and I still listen to them.
Wow.
And it was, so that was before Elim, and then, going to Elim. And then right before I went to Elim, I bought the Bible in Living Sound. I spent $200 for 75 record albums
Wow.
of the entire Bible.
Yeah.
And my thinking was, this is a lot of money for a 20-year-old in
And this is, what,
1976?
76?
Yeah, and I'm like, that's a lot of. But here's what I thought. You know what? I won't buy a television. I have the Bible in Living Sound.
Right.
And so still have them.
Wow.
And
you said 76?
1976.
I don't know, but how many records was that, you said?
75 of them.
75.
Yep.
My
And
goodness.
now, praise the Lord, I got, decades later, I got them in in CD form, and now they're digitized. Right. And I sent them to all three of our kids that I remember. Mm-hmm. And but so we went to Elim with that, and just I was blown away. I just was like, wow. And I remember very definitely feeling like anyone who doesn't finish all 3 years of Elim missed the will of God. But
Wow.
that's getting ahead of me.
Now, did you visit before you went, or so you just arrived on campus?
I arrived on campus, and
that was your first
Dad
time
and
there.
Mom brought me
Really?
with my aunt and uncle, and they were all drinking as we, before we arrived.
Right.
And my aunt passed out from being drunk in the backseat of the
no.
car. So that's my arrival to Elim.
What did they think of you going to a Protestant school?
I heard that my dad and some of my uncles or relatives would take bets on how long I'd last there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
so they kind of saw this still as sort of a phase, maybe.
right, exactly. And Dad always wanted me to live the American dream and do what he did in college, and nice job, and have the good things,
Right.
And here I found that by pursuing the Lord and His kingdom first, I have all those things anyway.
Right. Isn't that
But
amazing? Yeah.
Dad taught us what he knew.
Right.
So that was my arrival.
You can't blame him for wanting that
Nope.
without that perspective
Nope.
change. Yeah.
Nope, and it's so funny. So here's my big arrival at Elim, and
Yeah.
my aunt, and she was definitely one of my favorite aunts. Loved her to pieces, but here she is passed out on the back. So and anyway, the Lord put me with. It was so funny. I had to be the flakiest student on campus. I would, no doubt. And the Lord put me with, and it was the perfect match. So I came with a lot of flaky theology, name it, claim it, word of faith, all that nonsense.
Right.
Would just would nail me, And when I'd give some flaky doctrine, he'd open his Bible, show me.
Yeah.
Where is it? I couldn't,
Right.
And I've often said that I would bet my first year at Elim 40% of what I got from the Lord was through.
Really?
And so I even wondered when I first met him if he was saved, because I was so excited and flaky and zealous, and we
Right.
can pray together and get real tight. And he goes, "No, I don't trust you."
Wow.
That's what he said. That's what he said. And then I said, "We'll pray together." He goes, "No, I don't pray." So I think, of course, praise, but I
Right,
think he
right.
was trying to really bring
Kind of
me
be the
down.
opposite of.
Yes, and he would say, "Shut up, Gert, no, I'll kill you." So he was.
Which is a great way to disciple.
Yeah, but he was so down to earth, and,
was
and
beautiful.
sometimes he just punched me in the arm. But
Yeah.
the beautiful thing was, as the year went on, he did really love me, and he even apologized once. But that's okay. I love you, and I would hug him, and he's on a hugger. He's just like, "Boom, get away from me." But it was the perfect person that I needed.
Kind of the odd couple on campus.
Exactly. Oh, that's a great way to put it. We were the odd couple, and I still keep in touch with him. And next to my brother and my wife, I room with more than those 9 months at Elim, and I'll never forget it. Don't get the wrong impression. This is one of those grace moments too, almost like my conversion. The guy in the room next door who happened to be the best man at my wedding years later, but he was beating himself up because he said, "I'm not abiding in Christ." John 15, we're supposed to abide in Christ. So he's beating himself up, condemnation. And at the same time, I was, beating myself up. I don't love the Lord, my God, with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. I got to be a terrible Christian. And we were both under this self-inflicted condemnation. And so I walk into to my room, sitting there at his desk, and I just told him what I said, and he just turns around. It's all grace. And somehow, just by saying those words, it was like the Lord just opened. Like, I got it. I got it.
Wow.
I knew I was saved, but oh my dear, he just said, "It's all grace," and just turned around and went back to doing what he was doing at his desk. But I want to recollect, I just got on the floor and adored God because I was somehow, he took words you'd heard all your life, or Christian life,
Right.
and you got it. You finally got it.
Yeah.
It was like, it's all grace. He knew God like I didn't, and I wanted to know God like he did. And very prophetic, you know. And I'm not talking about flaky prophetic, but just he saw things the way they were. He saw through nonsense, you know, and just he would nail it. He just, you know.
And three words, almost in passing, could affect you 45 years later.
Yep.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep. So he was my roommate, and so. It was so funny, like I told you earlier, we thought that if a person didn't go all 3 years at Elim, I thought this, they missed the will of God. Well, near the end of the school year, when they asked, all right, we need, this was at a chapel, I believe, you know, we need your students to let us know, you know, if you're coming back next year. And I went to fill out the form, and I felt like, this, like really strong of me, you're not coming back. And I was like.
And this was your first year?
End of freshman year, Yep.
You said you finished the first year. So is it May, the end of the first year?
Yeah, this would have been, you know, end of April, early May of 1977. And so I just really felt strongly you're not coming back. And
which was totally against everything.
Oh, yes. So I went home, and then Kim and I wound up getting married that October. So that was, about a half a year later.
Were you planning it, or was it spontaneous?
Well, no, I guess I thought I was going to go all 3 years in a row and then get married. But then came back and felt like I was supposed to get married. And I can see the Lord's wisdom in that, because I needed to desperately grow up and mature. And my mother thought, well, she said, Mom was a riot, but she said basically, Michael's too immature to get married, but you know the responsibility will help him grow up. Right. And she was right, you know, usually was. And so anyway, so we got married in October of 1977, and then we took off. So we were gone for 2 years. You know, we just got an apartment, and I was, you know, attending a church faithfully, serving in the church. Right. I wound up being the maintenance man of the apartment complex we lived at. And so it was, prior to that, I was making $2.50 an hour as a drapery installer. So when this job opened up, my father-in-law my future father-in-law, when I asked Dad if I could marry Kim, you know, he said you had to have a full-time job, because what I was doing when I asked him, I was painting houses. And you know, you got work as you got work, but Dad wanted a steady job, so I wasn't being funny. Okay, I got a steady job. It was $2.50 an hour. And
but
so
it was steady.
It was steady. And I remember one time installing draperies in Watergate Hotel.
Really?
That happened in 72, of course, that debacle. But then, you know, so anyway, so then it was so wonderful that the maintenance man at our apartment complex was moving on to a better job. And so he recommended me. And so I took the job. So we got our apartment for free. And, you know, it was a lot better income. But one of the things I had to do every morning was collect all the garbage from all the apartment complexes and bring them to an incinerator that was at the bottom. This has to do with Elim, believe it or not. And had to bring him to an incinerator that was at the bottom of our building. And then I had to dump the garbage on this metal tray and, you know, shove it into the incinerator and burn it. So here I am doing it, and I'm just, oh God, all my friends are at Elim in Bible school and seeking you and in your glory, and I'm here burning garbage. And one time an aerosol can blew up and sprayed in my face, you know. So I'm like, God's forgotten me, and I felt like Joseph in prison, you know.
So it's like literally a dumpster fire. Life in a way.
And so that was what I did for those almost 2 years. But the other thing that the Lord used that season for, I started, now that I wasn't at Elim getting stuffed by these amazing teachers, and I'm going to get a lot of Elim people mad at me or disagreeing, but I don't know. I just felt like God graced me to be at Elim during the glory years when you had so many seasoned men of God who were, you know, I just do.
Well, let's take a little rabbit hole trail.
Sure.
I want to get back to where we left off, but especially that first year. Who and what really made an impact on you, teacher-wise and class-wise?
I remember it was so funny. Brother Paul Johansson had us freshmen. He had us in the gym it was part of orientation, and he was trying, just to so many times, including me, freshmen in their zeal would come with a super spiritual facade that they were somebody they really weren't, including me. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, he goes, he says, just be yourself. He said, if you wear a mask, then God has to deal with the mask, and then when he gets the mask off, then he's got to deal with you. So just be yourself.
Right.
And if you want to kick squirrels, and that's exactly what he said. And I was thinking, oh man, who is this guy?
Right.
But I found very, very quickly that I wanted to be like him so much that he was like a spiritual father I adopted, and many have, of course,
right.
but he didn't adopt me. Right. And it was so crazy because, again, I was the flakiest student on campus, and yet Brother Joe was so down to earth, and as everybody knows, and I often say that he had the gift of the word of wisdom, but it was in a New York City capsule.
Right.
So he could just set you free. He's the only person I ever knew who could correct me and set me free. When normally I get under this cloud when people would deal with me.
Condemnation type of
and I wish we had an hour just to tell you Brother Joe's stories of him dealing with me and Kim. And but anyway, so I just wanted so much to be like him, even though at first I wondered, man, is he saved or whatever? I just thought, and it was, Lord, this is crazy. It's like, I'm so unlike him. But I wanted to be like him, And so that was freshman year. And and that's exactly what God did. He just, like using Joe, my roommate, as well as... Right. So your question was, so we had Brother Joe, we had David Edwards, and Carlton Spencer was the president, and we had Edgar Parkins from England, who taught worship. He taught a number of things, but we had Paul Anderson there. Oh my dear, I'm trying to think. We had David Brett, evangelist from New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
And... it's just like Brother Jerry Wilkins there, and there were just, I don't know, just brothers that you just, and Costa Dare was in and out.
Right.
And so many seasoned people from around the world would come, and it was just a wow. And forgive me, Elim family, I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but and you would just spend chapel after chapel, service at the altar. Just didn't want to leave. Soaking it in, and and it just, there was no other. The tab was the most sacred place on earth, and now I don't know. It's just that I just felt so privileged to be there during that era. Sister Ruth was there, and had her for the Gospel of John, and so anyway.
So you had this beautiful mountaintop experience. But now you're burning garbage.
Burning garbage. Yep.
And thinking of all the.
Did you have to go back there?
Yeah.
And it was like, burning garbage. I thought God had forgotten me. And so and this is what happened. How did we get back to Elim? Well, I believe it or not. So forgive me. This is very important in the garbage burning season. What I would do, because now I know. Okay, Michael, you're not at Elim anymore, getting these 7-course meals from these seasoned men of God. You got to feed yourself. So what I would do was go when the workday was over at 3 in the afternoon, because I'd start at 6. I would go in my maintenance shop, sit at the desk, and I would study for, I don't know how long I did. Kim would get mad and knock on the door because she wanted to see me, and understandably so, but I was gorging on the text and just studying, and I was being able to hear from God through the Word myself, which was so that was like the seedbed and foundation for eventually me going into the ministry. So that was another thing God was doing in this Joseph's prison, so to speak, feeling that he had forgotten me in prison. And what happened was, Kim and I were married, but we were both really immature as far as, I felt very strongly we were both too emotionally attached to our parents. Both of us were.
Right.
And it was just, I just felt like we have got to get out away from them on our own and
Learn
grow
how
up.
to be a couple.
Yep.
Independently of that.
There was just too much strong emotional tie there, and it's understandable, but we just needed to grow up. And so it was one of the hardest times in my life where I was so troubled and concerned. I flew to Elim myself. It was during camp meeting, and Brother Joe was, there, and I just said, I got to see him. and I don't care how long. I got to see him. Right. So it was so funny. I'm off to the side. If you remember the tab, there were the two doors out to the side, and I was in one of the side rooms waiting for him, like falling apart, you know. And Brother Joe's leading worship for this camp meeting, and he's just out there leading worship, and so he comes back in the side room, and he goes, "You see, Michael, you got to flow. You got to flow." That's exactly what he said to me, and I'm just an insecure mess falling apart, you know. And so, here's what you need to do, you know. You need to come back to school, and I was like, Brother Joe, I don't know if I can get back into an academic study of the Word. And this is exactly what he said. God doesn't care. You just do what He tells you, you know.
So I love this. So one Joe was telling you it's all grace, you know. Another Joe was telling you you got to flow. It's like these three words that dictate your life. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So it's just so funny, Brother Joe. It's just gotten on my case so many times, and I needed it. But again, it always set me free. And even when he hammered me, you know, and that's when you know someone really understands grace. You know, one time another faculty member. Well, I'm getting ahead. Well, forgive me. I might as well say because I started.
We can come back.
Okay. Shall I come back to it then?
No.
So this as a senior. Here I was a senior at Elim. This is years later. I'm sorry I jumped to this, but it came to mind because it's connected to Brother Joe being filled with grace. Right. I started skipping chapels as a senior in Bible school. I don't know. I just, wherever I was at. And so one of the faculty members wanted to get on my case, and he told Brother Joe, and rightly so. He should have done that. But I'll never forget what Brother Joe, when I went to see Brother Joe, what Brother Joe told me. He told him, he goes, no. Michael's a big boy. He's got the Holy Spirit in him. Let the Spirit of God talk to him. You know, and it's like, I didn't think I could have respected Brother Joe any more than I did, and it just shot through the roof.
Right.
When I knew I should have gotten nailed, and this other faculty member was a real man of God, and he was right. But Brother Joe knew how to.
But there was a respect there too, which is sort of interesting. Seeing, you know, I've always said, you know, sometimes talking about the garbage burning phase. You know, sometimes God brings you to a place you would never go voluntarily to teach you something you can't learn anyplace else.
There you go.
You know, and so seeing this maturity that there was, what would it have been like if you just went 3 straight years like you would plan, but almost that there was a break there, that maturity was happening at an accelerated rate. So that in your senior year, he could say something like that.
Yep. And so at that camp meeting, I'll never forget it. So it would have been July of 77. No, forgive me, July of 79. You know, he said it, and so, oh my dear, it was so hard telling the parents and moving out because Kim was pregnant for our firstborn, Matthew. And of course, I get it. It ripped the grandparents apart, their first grandchild. Right. Not on my father's, but on definitely Kim's side. So it was very hard, and I felt like I was running from problems, and but I just felt like, be honest with you, I felt like I needed to save our marriage because I just felt like we are so immature and still emotionally attached. Like I said to our parents, we need to get like this and get strong in ourselves. So it was one of the hardest times of my life. But it was the hardest thing I ever did. One of the hardest and one of the best things I ever did by God's grace was. And Brother Joe.
And this was deciding to come back to Elim.
Going back to Elim. And again, I even told Brother Joe, I don't want to, remember what I told you. I can't get back into an academic study of the Word and what he told me. But then I said, I just want to come and work on maintenance here. No, you're going to come back and go to school. And so we did. And
you got the accent down spot, by the way.
What's that?
You got his voice down spot on.
I'm telling you. So, and so we did, and it was, like I said, it was so hard, but we moved, got a U-Haul, and this is funny, on the way I stopped at my former roommates and picked him up and his stuff. He went back as a married student too, and so anyway, it was hard. I would lay in bed at night after we moved back and just felt, you ran from your problem. Oh, it was horrible, buddy. And I thought it was God because it made sense. Michael, you did.
Right.
And it was oppression and depression. And so I said, I got to talk to Brother Joe. I got to talk to him. So I went and I waited in his office. I think it was for an hour. And I said, I don't care how long I have to wait. I'm seeing him. And I don't know how to say this without crying, but I was a mess. And Kim wanted to go back home. And I don't blame her. I get it. First child. And so I tell Brother Joe, finally get to see him, and Brother Joe, I'm just laying in bed at night, and I just keep, having these, I didn't say voices, but these thoughts like you're running away from your problems, and he goes, it's not God.
Wow.
And I said, how
just
can
like
you,
that.
Just
right?
like that. It's not God. And I said, how can you be sure? And here I am wrestling for days and nights, How can you be sure? It's not God.
Which, let me point out, is another 3-word phrase.
I was like, and so, again, he set me free, and then he pulled, then another time we were in there with Kim, and Kim was crying because she wanted to go back and be near her parents, and I don't blame her a bit. It's normal, it's natural, And so, Brother Joe goes to me, he goes, are you listening to her? I'm sitting there, and then he goes to Kim. You know what, Kim? You may never go back to Virginia. God might move Michael to California. Just like that while Kim's sitting there crying.
You got to say the sympathy level is okay.
So but again, and I'm sure virtually every Elim alumni or alumnus will know. Yeah, I get it. That's Brother Joe.
Right.
And so.
But it sounds like
you're free.
Yeah, you guys were both going through. You had to find it, but there was some guide points in sort of the struggle to find your own way there.
Buddy, he was, my dear. So I would just, he was my hero, and he'll be the first to admit he's got a lot of issues and problems. But to me, it was like, and so I'll never forget. When we would have special speakers who at conferences or special chapels, whatever, and the guy was saying something that sounded really off. I just remember I'd watch Brother Joe like a hawk.
See how it would react.
I wonder what Brother Joe's thinking about this guy, and of course he was keeping his cool up there,
right.
And but that's how much I wish I was like him, because he was secure. I wasn't. Still am not. I'm the most insecure person I know, but he was so secure in his faith, and he knew God, he knew grace, and he'd always had, like I said, the word of wisdom encapsulated in a New York City accent, New York City package. But so anyway, so we were there.
And I got to ask, how did Kim make her way through this? I mean, we all feel for her.
Sure.
Close family, beautiful, your first child. She was willing to follow God, out there. But I think we could all feel that sort of tension. How did she find her way in that
The Elim
season?
family.
Yeah.
The other married students, the campus life, even though she was at home, of course, a lot with the baby, with Matthew. But what really helped that is that when we moved up there, we lived on Main Street and up on the top floor of an old woman's house. She used to have a number of students there. But then they built the new married dorms at Elim in 1980. They're the white building with that's behind the ball field.
We were the gym now, right?
Yeah,
the new gym.
Yeah, it's next to the gym. It's the white building,
right.
And so we were the first members to live in there. Apartment number 10, and we couldn't afford it. But here's what we thought. I remember telling Kim, I was working at UPS up in the city, and I said, you know what, honey, tell you what, let's just, it is more than we can afford, but you know what, it's for Elim, it's for the kingdom. Let's just take a step of faith and just move there, and we'll be on campus and giving to the school. So that's what we did, and we moved on campus, and this is amazing. A number of years later, our youngest son Caleb, his future wife's mother and father, Jim and Donna DiBiaso, they moved into apartment number 10, like 4 years after we moved out.
Right.
So their baby Elizabeth married our baby Caleb.
Right.
Years later.
But you guys lived in the same place,
apartment.
and that's fun.
Yep. And so
I think God does that just to
Yep.
So I think it entertains him.
It's just amazing. And so, of course, so when it was time to graduate, I was in Bob Sorge's class and Randy Terry, that class. But when it was time to graduate, I didn't feel as a married couple we were ready to leave campus, because we were still working through stuff, and we needed to stay in the bubble and the security. So I took 2 years my senior year I just felt we weren't ready.
Right.
And so anyway, this is so funny. I wound up being the valedictorian and class speaker for our class, 1982, and Kim was super pregnant with our daughter. She was 2.5 weeks late, so Kim was bulging, during the graduation ceremony, and this was something funny. During my graduation speech, I really felt like I failed because I was trying to imitate Brother Edwards as he spoke,
Right.
and I should have stopped trying to copy him and just be myself. But one of the things I said, well, I was telling the classmates in the audience, as I labored through this message, and Kim was about to explode, and so I didn't even mean, and everybody
Neville.
starts cracking up.
Right,
And
I thought you were a joke.
and I turned around to the elders, and I said, I didn't mean that. And they said, keep going. So my dad filmed part of that ceremony on his Super 8.
Right.
Camcorders weren't out yet. And so I posted it on my YouTube channel a few years ago. So it has the actual, that has that, and then I also...
But there's no audio, right?
No audio. I put
video.
background music to it.
Yeah.
But I also filmed the graduation ceremony of 1980 with my dad's camera. No sound,
Right.
but it has all the Elim fathers in it coming out of the tab, and that's on my YouTube channel too.
I'm gonna look that up. That's
So the two
beautiful.
are called Elim Graduate. It's on my YouTube channel, Michael Robert Gurton. But it's also, and these things are entitled Elim Graduating Class 1980, and then Elim Graduating Class 1982. So it just has some priceless, precious archival EBI footage.
And I know with the 100, like I said, we're recording this
Oh,
2024. It's the 100th anniversary for Elim. I'll make sure that they see that.
Oh,
'cause
and
that
so
might be
many of these
beautiful.
fathers are gone who were in that footage, like, Brother Carlton, of course, Brother David,
Right.
Costa Dare. David Brett sadly died early. He was a younger man, but he died well before his time, so to speak, in the natural. Trying to think who else is not here with us anymore. Chester Gretz, he was in it. He's gone. He was with EF for years, a missionary overseas. Stacy Klein's in it.
Beautiful. He
Yep.
must have been a young man.
Yep,
early
he
teacher
was.
at that
He
time.
was. Yep. I had Stacy for church history, but I'm trying to think of other. It's amazing now as I ponder it. Oh, Father, how many are gone that are in that footage? Anyway, that's something that is really cool.
It's interesting. On a side note, not that I'll put this in, but I had Brother Stacy too. Made a big impact on my life. In fact, when he passed away, was sort of the motivation for doing these stories from Elim, because I kept thinking, I wish I had his. Just at the end, I wish and then thinking back of all these, men of God saying. Yeah, the stories are there, but it would have been beautiful just to, sit down with them and hear it from them. So,
Sheldon Sorge, who was like the Dick Grout of that era, and so anyway, so we graduated and we moved to the Rochester area. I was working at UPS still. Of course, we had to get off campus, and
right. So you felt you still wanted to stay in the area, though. You felt God was-
stay in the area, and then I was working at UPS, and then working part time, as all of us did. There was a whole crew of us who lived in our married dorm building. Most of us
Right.
that we would ride together in carpool at UPS.
But you couldn't stay on campus.
Couldn't stay on campus, right? So I don't know how long after that, but excuse me. UPS asked me to be a manager. I wanted to be in management or a supervisor, and of course I said no. It's easier to get fired, and you do a lot more hours than when you're,
So you didn't see the upside of that.
No, didn't see the upside,
Yeah.
but so and plus I wasn't proud of being a Teamster in the union, but you had to be if you wanted to work there. So anyway, UPS asked me to drive. So in the space of one day, I went making more than double of what I was making, being a sorter or a loader, whatever. But Kim and I tried to really have scruples with our income, because we knew going into the ministry it wasn't going to be like that.
Right.
So I started driving, and I'm getting around to you in Bethel, to Bethel. And so, and then what happened was we had now 3 children by 1984. And a dear brother and friend who you have met, Guy Gabriel. This is while I was still working for UPS.
Oh, yeah.
Guy Gabriel, who I've known, I met him my freshman year at Elim, 1976. Guy, I think, was a senior then, but he's been like a big brother to me, and we were on staff at a church in Ohio years ago. But anyway, Guy all of a sudden starts asking me, hey, why don't you helped me with the camps, the Elim, the CYA camps on campus. And
these were summer.
These are Elim summer camp program, and they used to hold them at Elim campus. And I was like, nah. And he used to goad me and get on my case, And I don't know how many times I said no, but then one time, I agreed to do it. So.
And had you done any kids youth ministry up to this point?
Not that I remember. In 1975, before I had even met. No, I had met Kim's family. In 1975, I worked at a Jewish day camp in South Jersey. I stayed there all summer, but it was not a Christian camp, but it was a Jewish day camp.
Right.
And believe it or not, it wound up being sold to the organization that started the Creation Festival.
Oh, okay.
All right. So Creation.
So I used to go to Creation, so it would have been on that
We
property.
ministered there one time because the Donut Man, that's another story, couldn't make all his meetings. So the caboose team, 30 years ago this summer, we ministered at the Creation. That's on my YouTube channel too.
That's funny. So caboose covered for the Donut Man.
Covered for the Donut Man. So I'm trying to think. So Guy asked me to come to Elim camps, 1984. I was, I think, the morning teacher. And I think it was at senior high. And so I went one time, and, of course I was hooked. And so I took, let me think now. I took off, I had 3 small children at home. One was not even a year old. I think I took off from UPS without pay just to be able to go to this camp, to help Guy at camp.
And this was your first year doing
First year,
camp.
1984. And then I started going every year. And then what happened was I used to, because I'm, how do I say this? I'm so attached to my family for years, and I still feel this way, and I know I need to get over it. But there was so much in me that I wanted to keep our 3 children elementary age their whole lives, and all 5 of us go into heaven together as a family unit. That's just where I'm telling you, I know I need to grow up, but the elementary years to me are just priceless. And so anyway, I would drive like an idiot in my UPS truck to get home to be with Kim and the kids. So I drive like crazy, and I start having all these accidents, This has to do, believe it or not, with Bethel.
Right.
And so anyway, and I would like run over a mailbox one time. This is a rabbit trail, but it's kind of funny. Rochester in the winter. Well, there was a house that was way off the road, had a real long driveway, and I thought, I'm not walking all the way up there with a package, so I drove the truck in their driveway. I applied the brakes, and it just kept sliding and went into their garage door.
Oh, no.
So it banged the garage door, if I remember right. And just started having one accident after another. And another time, I jumped into the truck after I gave a package to a company at the loading dock, and I just rammed it into reverse to get out of there and get, and I didn't see another truck had pulled in behind me, so I backed into him. So just a lot of stuff like that. Where
your motivation was
to get home to Kim and the kids.
Yeah.
And I would skip lunch so I could get home earlier and wouldn't take my lunch hour. And sometimes when I got back to the building, this is at UPS in Rochester, I would take my shower at work. And so when I got home to Kim and the kids, I was there ready to go, be with them. Didn't have to.
Beautiful.
But I used to get the other drivers in my group kind of upset because my time was so much better than theirs, and this is why.
Right.
But anyway, UPS had to fire me. They liked me, but they had to fire me because I had too many accidents, So what they did to keep me is that they put me on preload all night from it was 8 at night till 6 in the morning. So it was a graveyard shift. But what they did, which they shouldn't have done, and I'm not saying it was a wrong motive, but they had me loading tractor trailers for 8 hours when normally they'd have 2 part-time shifts, 4 hours apiece.
Right.
So what
So
happened?
you were doing twice. What?
Twice. And what happened was my back went out.
Oh no.
And so I was on disability, and during that time, so I was on disability, and during that time, I think it was I took off, I guess, to go to the camp in 1985. And I don't know if you know Shelley Carl. Shelley Carl was the children's pastor at Bethel before me. But she had a burden for Japan. She was going to Japan, that was her goal. And she's there, and she's been there for decades. But anyway, Shelley...
No, you say that, I do know who she is.
Yep. So Shelley, so I was at camp in summer of 1985, and so Shelley happened to be there with Bethel kids. So she saw the way I ministered to kids and interacted with them. Well, she knew she was leaving Bethel. So she went back to Pastor Ron Domina and told him, hey, I saw this guy, that I think could really be a good replacement for me. And so Pastor Ron connected with me.
Now, had you had any connection with Shelley or Bethel before that? Okay.
Nope. And we were going to a small Assembly of God church in Ontario, New York, a storefront church, excuse me, and that just struggled to stay afloat. And we were, this is funny, we were living above a liquor store.
You made your way from the basement.
From the basement. I don't know if I ever connected that.
Yeah.
Missouri in the basement.
Yeah.
And then it was Ontario, just, east of Webster, where you live.
Right.
So we were on Main Street right in Ontario, and this church was just a few doors down, and it was Living Word Assembly. And anyway, we were attending this, I think I was an elder there maybe, led worship at times. But anyway, so Shelley, she told Pastor Ron. So Pastor Ron, contacted us, but Kim and I were having kind of marital struggles because I'd been saved 12 years and my heart was burning to go into the ministry,
right.
But I didn't have a call to kids. I really wanted to be a pastor. And so Kim and I think Kim was for me going to Bethel, but I was just like really wrestling with this. It's like, I don't know. So we were just having troubles. We even contacted some Elim, another married couple from Elim who lived next door to us in the married dorms, and we would counsel with them, just didn't know what to do.
So she kind of saw your path forward in kids ministry.
That's what I remember.
But you thought maybe you were giving up your pathway towards adults.
So what happened was Pastor Ron, and I forget who else was in some brothers from the assemblies, I assume, were interviewing me. And so I think it was Pastor Ron. He said, do you have a ministry to children? And I said, no, I have I'm called to minister to God's people. And that includes children.
Right.
So I was honest, and so...
Kind of a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah,
though.
well, I was. I just didn't have a specific call to children.
Right.
And so anyway, I had just some doctrinal differences with AG. I didn't have an eschatology. They have they have a certain one. And so I'll never forget Pastor Ron, when I brought that up, I said, I don't have my eschatology down. I have, of course, basic things that you have to have down. But so Brother Ron, he was really trying to fight for me to get me in.
Right.
So he said, well, could you teach it?
Even if you don't believe it, can you at least teach it?
And I said, I guess so.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I passed that board thing. And
which is interesting because I guess it wasn't too much longer that Bethel itself left the assemblies.
I want to recollect this was 1986.
Yeah.
And maybe during those interviews, it might even been late 1985. I think it was late 85. But so, I don't think, I don't know when they left
but I know it
early
wasn't
2000s,
too much
maybe?
longer. Okay.
Might have been a while. And forgive me, before Shelley went to Japan, but Joni Kaminsky was a single gal at the church. It was a real sweetheart. She followed Shelley. We followed Joni. I just remembered there was someone in between.
And just for the listeners, we're talking about Bethel Christian Fellowship, church in downtown Rochester.
And at the time, it was Bethel Full Gospel Church.
Full Gospel Church.
Yeah,
okay.
Before they changed their name.
Right.
And so anyway, we bought our first house in Rochester. But so we went in the matter of one weekend from this struggling little storefront church to Bethel, who, when we were there, I think the biggest they got was 1,400.
Wow.
And so it was
that was really kind of at its
I was
glory days.
overwhelmed.
That was a big...
I was scared to death, and I was overwhelmed.
How many kids?
100 kids were in kids' church.
Wow.
And
you went from Neville, other than camp, Neville leading a kids ministry to 100 kids.
That I may have volunteered in churches along the way. I can't
never
believe I didn't.
Right,
no.
yeah.
And so here I had 100 kids. And I'll never forget, my first Sunday in ministry there was January 5th, 1986. And I was remembered thinking, what in the world am I going to do with 100 kids for an hour and a half? But you know what? It would turn out I didn't have enough time.
Wow.
Yeah. So
how did that work out?
Well, I did puppets. I led worship. I preached, and of course, the key to all these decades, both in pastoring children and camps and Via Dolorosa for 19 years, is surrounding yourself with people, with teams. I'm a team leader. Even now with camps for decades, I will have little brothers by my side who I'm old enough to be, maybe I don't know, well, their father, but I defer to them. Many times I don't know what I'm doing. What do you guys think? And I follow them. So I've always been a team leader like that. So the teams make you look good.
Right.
Have an army of people.
So you went in with a team at Bethel.
Well, I I was recruiting people constantly, and my philosophy of recruiting children's workers is you never make mass appeals. If you do, the devil gets in line. He loves to work with kids. So what I would do is watch people. I would watch how they interacted with the Lord and interacted with people. And of course with children. And then they're the ones I'd go after.
And you would invite.
And then they
I like how you said that. When you make a mass appeal,
the devil gets
in line.
That's
such a sobering reality.
And he's proven that many times, hasn't he? And so, this is what I love to do, was to blow people's minds through the years in children's ministries, is that so many, including me, assume it's kitty. But I was teaching kids for decades theology that many adults didn't get. Forgive me if that sounds arrogant. It just, I loved theology and gorged on it, and I gave the kids what I got. So, you name it, I was teaching it to them. From the decrees of God to angelology to you name it, we would teach it. And so what I loved is that the workers who would come were like, this is kids' church?
I used to love that myself. You get to, it kind of proves, when Jesus said, unless you become like little children. But I think it's not just about you becoming immature, but you teaching something in a way that it's deep but clear and exciting. So, yeah.
So we were there for 2 years, and a little over 2 years. And
would you write your own curriculum, your own?
I did, yeah. Well, we had the train depot. Okay. I don't know if you remember that. But you of course know Bill Wilson.
Right.
Well, he and the Tedesco brothers, I think, wrote Train Depot. Okay. So I would have my workers in teams that would take the younger children and teach the younger children after I led the whole group in worship.
Right.
And then we'd split up, and I'd take upper elementary, they take lower. And so they would, I'd use Train Depot with them, but I would teach what I was getting from the Word that I remember. And so that also started my career of playing Pontius Pilate. It started at Bethel.
So when playing that, and I'm sure this is going to tie in, when did the time machine come into play?
I think, we did, in the years at Bethel, we did a summer kids crusade for like 2 or 3 nights. And I think it was 1987, this woman named Judy Mensch, she was a Messianic Jew, single gal, and I don't even know how I heard about her, but I asked her to be our guest speaker. So she gets there, and she's a riot, and still keep in touch with her. And she said, Michael, I need a refrigerator box. And I'm like, refrigerator box? Where can we get a refrigerator box? We got her a refrigerator box. So she cuts a door in it, and then I think she put some green glitter on it. Yeah. And she said, this is a time machine. So what I did is I took her idea and ran with it, and that's where how my time machines, forgive the expression, evolved. It was because of Judy, right. And so she's still ministering. She just got back from Spain, hoping to see her maybe in Reading, Pennsylvania in the near future. I was just connecting with her.
Well, you need to pass on. I've told you briefly the story too. You need to pass on to her. For years, eventually you perfected the time machine, or I don't
know. They're dangerous electronically.
Yeah, you came to Elim when I was a student there, and I had no interest in kids ministry whatsoever. But in chapel you did it, and you came out as David, and I was just my jaw was dropped. And
that's so funny. I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I remember saying to myself, I never want to do kids ministry, but if I ever did, I want to do that. And so years later, when God called me to kids ministry, I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to build my time machine. This was in Virginia Beach. And my wife and I, we started a kids ministry. And, of course, my first time machine got a refrigerator box, cut a hole in it. Wow. I think I put some green glitter on it. And I said, this is my time machine.
Wow.
But ever since, in 25 years of kids ministry, we had a different time machine at every location. And so we would keep track of it. Time pod 1, time pod 2. We were up to, the last one I built was time pod 11. So we had 11 different, and they were all very different.
Twice as many as I've built. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I'll never forget. I'd done a lot of student body chapels through the years with my time machine.
Right.
I'll never forget one year I brought it, and our daughter Laura, a friend of hers, Nick DeAntonia, who I believe goes to the Chris Lonneville, whose church in Warsaw, who's now pastored by John.
Oh, wait, Celebrate Church.
Okay, is that what it's called now? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And anyway, so Nick.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm getting my churches mixed up.
But Nick was a classmate of Laura, and one of the best drummers I've ever heard. I feel like I know nothing with Nick. But anyway, so when Nick heard what I was going to do in chapel with a time machine, this is what Laura told me. Nick's like, a time machine? What is this? I said, we're college students, and I don't blame him. I can totally see it because, it seems kitty.
Yeah.
But when he saw what came out of it, and at Elim, I did a Civil War reenactment where I was shooting a real pistol with black powder charges. It's on my YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
And it's called Christian Casualties, the Battle of Shiloh, 1862. Wow. And so then I think that was the one maybe that when Nick was there, and I did the World Trade Tower disaster. It was the month after it happened, where it was so traumatic. I had victims coming out of the tower. I was a fireman. We had paramedics on my YouTube channel, where some of the students at Elim who were in New York when it happened, they had to leave the chapel because it was too intense for them.
Yeah.
So it's not kitty.
Right,
I've had gladiators come out of it. And another one I did at Elim was the guy who discovered X-rays. And then it goes into a very detailed teaching about Judgment Day, when everyone will be under God's X-ray, and only Christians are covered by the lead vest.
Right.
And then another one was Pontius Pilate. He came out in chains like an animal, awaiting his judgment. So the time machine is not kitty. And well, why do you use one, Michael? Well, if you just have actors coming out of a closet or a side room, okay, all right, we're going to see a drama now. Here comes the time machine is a fun way to bring these people back from the past into your present, then send them back.
Isn't that beautiful? It's a storytelling device that begins with sort of the whimsical, but then when you I mean it's I've seen it. And it captivates. I say the same with puppets.
Yep.
Adults might scoff it, or even younger kids, but once you start
Adults
getting
love
their
them too.
attention. You get their attention, and then they will listen to what you have.
My trademark puppet chip has a lot of adult fans. But just a few years ago at our camps, all 3 summer camps, and a youth retreat I typically do in Jersey, we had the death of Nadab and Abihu by the fire of God in Leviticus chapter 10 come out of the time machine. Right. It was too hard logistically to bring both of them out on stretchers, so we brought out Nadab on a stretcher. It was actually an inflated dummy, but it's very intense. So time machine, as you well know, is not kitty. You can play with it, but I don't usually do it.
1987, Judy kind of showed you the way, and you just sort of added that to the create. How did this whole creativity in teaching? It seems like it was there before, but it seems almost like another switch during this time was flipped. And
well, I was desperate to keep the kids' attention, and I reek with ADD. I have no doubt, and have for probably all my life. And I think somebody said decades ago, Michael's smart, but he's just gets distracted.
Right.
But so I don't know how many times Kim would say, Michael, look at me. Now, what did I just say?
Yeah.
And I'll go, you get this, and gap, this, and this. So she has to look in my eyes, But
so kind of a neurodivergent way of giving you attention.
So the way all the visuals and the objects came is because I was desperate to keep the children's attention. So when I would immerse myself in the text of Scripture again and again and again is the way I study. My dear friend and mentor George Bowen, he reads about 150 books a year.
goodness.
I don't read one book a year. I don't. I'm ashamed to say that, but I have tons and tons of theology books. They're like wallpaper.
Right.
But what I typically do is take a small part of them, just like the Bible, and I'll just gorge on it and keep digging deeper repeatedly.
Right.
That's just the way I'm wired. I wish I wasn't, but I am. And so anyway, as I'm immersed...
And I've always said, I love those who could read so much, but sometimes you don't stop to sort of smell the roses.
And that's
which
me.
You can do diving in.
So as I was, all of a sudden these ideas of how to illustrate the text came to my mind. I'd either have to find, buy, or build them. And so, I don't know, like Willie George was Gospel Bill many years ago. I teethed on him in children's ministries when I started. And I'll never forget what he said one time. He said, you can be standing in front of a group of kids and just be holding a styrofoam cup that has absolutely nothing to do with your lesson, and they will be riveted. Why is he holding the styrofoam cup?
Right.
And Bill Wilson said 83% of what a kid sees or learns is what he sees. So these were things that were deeply ingrained in my infant years in children's ministries, but really for my own sake, I was desperate to keep their attention. And so as I moved down the table of object lessons, they are my sermon notes. And if anyone were to come and rearrange them when I wasn't looking, they're preaching, because I'm done. And I'm serious. They keep. So when I
They kept you on track.
Oh yeah, and when I see the object lesson, it brings the text. And so I've used them for decades with all ages. I've never heard anyone say, we don't like them, don't use them. My pastor in Delaware one time asked me, Michael, will you preach on Sunday morning without your stuff? But I don't think he disliked them, but he asked me to do it that way. But anyway, so I use them for children to senior citizens. And I don't know how many times in my itinerant travels in the last 24 years where senior citizens come to me and they thank me for them. Thank you, I'm a visual learner.
Right.
And so it means a lot more work. I mean, you go in my basement, our basement's basically divided into 4 sectors, and the caboose room is one of the sectors.
Yeah.
And you go in there and it almost looks like a Home Depot warehouse. There are shelves and all these black and yellow bins.
And of course, caboose is the name of your
Caboose.
ministry. Right?
And that's another story. But so my time machine's in the garage. Most of my costumes are in the backyard shed, and then my object lessons are in the basement. We were at Bethel 2.25 years, and so I didn't think I would be there that short a time. One of the things that happened at Bethel is that for an Easter thing, I think I asked Pastor Ron if we could do an Easter drama that basically was taken verbatim from Jesus of Nazareth, the miniseries from 1977, which to me, I'm getting a lot of people mad at me, but to me, I think it's the gold standard of Jesus movies.
Yeah.
And I just do. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I took basically Pontius Pilate's scene, and my pilot is basically an imitation of Rod Steiger, who played him in that. So I called it The Trial, and we did it the first time ever was in one of the Easters that I was at Bethel, either it would have been 86 or 87, because we moved in Easter season of 88. And so, and ever since then I have done Pontius Pilate at every church I've been at. And then we started Via Dolorosa, my pastor in Delaware did in 2004, and it went nonstop except for COVID until this year.
And I want to hear more about that. But Pontius Pilate was one of the central focuses of the Via Dolorosa.
Yes,
creation.
he was one of the ones. Yep. And so, but I did him at Bethel, and that was where it started. Doing Pilate was at Bethel. And
did the time machine connect with that?
No, I didn't.
That was something
No,
a bit separate.
no, not for the Easter productions. I never used the time machine for that, but because that would have taken away from it. There's a time to use the time machine and a time to not, and that would definitely not be. But again, like I said earlier, I do bring Pilate out when I do his Judgment Day sermon time machine drama, and I just dug that up from my YouTube channel just last week, and I want to redo it and do post production. But anyway, so after 2 years at Bethel, I was really feeling like my time there was done. And the way I'm wired, I desperately need very tight, intimate relationship with the pastoral staff that I work with. It's my insecurity and need. Right. And so, but Pastor Ron was pastor of this massive church, and he had so much staff, and he had so many irons in the fire. So I'm afraid that maybe I was needing more than he could give me. Right. And so I just felt like, you know what, I guess I need to go. And again, I confess it. I'm just that kind of person where I gotta and we would have fun times with him, and he was a riot, and we'd tease and play a lot. But I guess poor Pastor Ron, I needed more than what he could give me, and that's my need. So anyway, I'll never forget how hard it was to go in his office and tell him. Never forget it. And excuse me. So this same guy, Gabriel, he was at a church in Columbus, Ohio, and he had asked me a number of times, hey, Gerton, get out here. They need a kids pastor out here. Guy was the youth pastor. And the way Guy and I mess with each other for decades, I'd say, shut up, go away. But then one time he called me, and as soon as he asked me, I felt like the Spirit of God just pierced me in the heart. And I thought, this is God. And I started to cry.
Wow.
And so...
And it's just the timing of it was just perfect.
I'll never forget telling Kim. The first thing I told the Lord when I hung up with Guy, Lord, this is you. You're going to have to tell Kim.
Right.
Because you know this very well. Bethel was one of the plums or cherries of all the state of New York in the Assemblies of God.
Right.
It was like an envy of, it was just one of the plums of the whole state.
And kind of when you work for that, where do you go that's the next step up?
That's right.
You don't.
You don't. And I'll never forget, and I'm backtracking, but when my first business meeting that I went to when I started there, I was so overwhelmed that when I had to leave it and go to my office and lay on my face because I couldn't handle it, the figures, the money, like compared to our struggling storefront church,
Right.
It was too big for me.
Right.
And so...
I mean, it's kind of fair to say that a lot of times when a kids pastor goes into something so big, it's not necessarily good for them, that to survive that. But it is a trial by fire.
It was just overwhelming, and the Lord gave us great favor with the people, and I still have a sermon that I had preached there in 1987. That way back then they filmed it,
Really?
So that's on my YouTube channel. It's not great video, but at least it's something. And I would drum sometimes for Sunday night services, and so it was just a wonderful 2.25 years of rich experience. Still couldn't believe that we. Our first full-time ministry thing, and it was at a church that big. I was like, wow. So, wound up going to Ohio Independent Charismatic Church.
So how did Kim take it when you told her?
Well, the church flew us out there and, meet the people and, of course, meet the leadership. And bless her heart, she struggled at times, but she's always followed me. And it reminds me of something that Brother Joe told Gloria when he proposed to her. He said something like, I can't promise you riches or the American dream, but I do promise you the will of God. And like, wow. I didn't say those words to Kim, but that was my heart. That we're doing the will of God. So we went out there. We were there almost exactly the same time frame, 2.25 years, I think.
And what church were you?
It was called Zion Christian Fellowship.
Zion.
It's still there. Pastor Darrell Sanders was the founding pastor, and he played football for Ohio State and then also for the Detroit Lions.
Oh, wow.
So, and he was a towering man. And so I was, like I said, so Guy and I were his knucklehead youth and children's pastors. But so we were there 2.25 years, and then from there we went to Reading, Pennsylvania. It was funny. Somebody again felt like I was done at Zion. I'd given them all I had, and I just felt like I don't know. We were just in some ways going in two different directions, and I just blessed them on the way out, and still keep in touch with Pastor Darrell today and love him. And
you said to me one time, and I won't forget this, is you said, especially in the days of beginning ministry, is you go, you share the vision, you wait till it's caught, then you go on to the next one. And I thought that was beautiful, because sometimes you can't stay as long as you wish,
right?
But there's enough.
Right. I know what you're referring to is when I basically felt like I, quote unquote, was an apostle in children's ministries, where I would impart vision, train people, build equipment, get it running. But once it was running, I'd get antsy, like I got to start again.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And some people are called to be builders, and some people are called, to be long term. But there's something special and beautiful in that building.
Yes.
But it keeps you on the road.
Right. So, this sounds derogatory to my dear pastor friends, and but it is not. But I was not wired or gifted for maintenance mode, which is very important. That I wish there was a better way to, like, the day in and day out, week in and weekend, year in and year out of shepherding God's people, the same group of people. Right. And I'm just not wired that way. And I just marvel at my many head pastor friends, like, wow, Lord, how did they do it? I could never do that. And of course, because He didn't gift me and wire me for it. And so when our time with Zion was done, of course, I was searching like crazy, like, what do we do next? I had like 7 possibilities, and even remotely, there were like 7, I remember, and I was just really angsting, worried, what do we do? I have 3 children, and and all of a sudden, as we're in the midst of this, like, and it gets tense, and stress is high, and all of a sudden somebody knocks on our door, and it's a realtor, and she wanted to sell our house, and she goes, can I sell your house? And then
just a cold call.
Yes, out of nowhere, and a cold call. That's right. And so then somehow I found out she was from Reading, Pennsylvania, and that was, Reading was one of the main opportunities next, as I was stressing and worried and fearful. Lord, what do I do? Right. And she goes, I'm from Reading, and I said, I poked her. I deliberately poked. I said, "Are you an angel?" I poked her right in the shoulder, and she said, "No, I'm not an angel," or something like that. And so. That was, and what happened was somebody, there was a church in the middle of Reading that needed to relieve their present children's pastor because she had just poured her heart out and given her all she had, and she needed a rest. She needed reinforcements. And so anyway, there was a dear sister in the Lord overseeing the youth and children there, Edith Lehman, and she called Elim. And they said, do you know any children's pastors? And they gave her my name. So we went to, we drove to Reading, and
this is in the early 90s?
This was 1991. Technically, when we drove there to spy out the land, it was December of 1990. And we drove and got there, and they were practicing for their Christmas production, Salty. Those Salty productions. Oh, yeah, remember those? The singing songbook. Yep. Course. And so anyway, we went into this. It was an old Reformed cathedral-looking building, and the sanctuary was on the top floor. I'd never seen one like that before. So anyway, when we went in there to just see what they were doing, and the pastor was in there because, of course, they were rehearsing. When we opened those doors and walked in that sanctuary, I'll never forget it. I went, it just took your breath away. It's the most beautiful sanctuary I've ever seen, and still is. And so, we just eventually wound up moving to Reading, and so I was jogging one morning. I was a runner for 26 years till sciatica took that out of the way. But anyway, one morning I'm running as we started at Reading, and I'm pondering, Lord, what do I name the children's ministry? Because I always tried to name the children's ministries I would start, or what's the word I'm looking for, revamp or reignite, whatever.
But the name would almost follow the vision.
Yes, it would have something to do with either the vision or the history of the church.
So what were some of the ones in...
Well, Bethel's already had theirs called Kingdom Kids, so I kept that.
Okay.
But when I got to Zion, Zion's was Zion Young Lions.
Zion Young Lions.
Yep. And
catchy.
That was the name of them. And so as I'm running... before the Lord, I was running, of course, pondering before the Lord and talking to the Lord in my brain. But anyway, I was like, Lord, what do I name the children's ministries here? As I was running, I'm thinking, what is Reading famous for? Well, they're famous for shopping outlets. People from buses come to the outlets there to get deals. But of course, Reading Railroad, a Monopoly game. Reading Railroad. Right. So that came to mind, and Reading Railroad was the first billion-dollar corporation in the world. Wow. And so anyway, so all of a sudden in my mind, I saw a train, so to speak, thinking of a train. Well, the engine is the pastor and the elders. The coal car or the tender, senior citizens. The box car, middle-aged. Then you have young adults, then teenagers. Well, what's the last car? It's the children. It's the caboose. So that's where Caboose came from.
And this came to you while you were running.
Running, while I was running, and so I decided to name it Caboose, because it's, of course, very related to Reading.
Right.
And so anyway, I built a massive Caboose puppet stage that was 16 feet wide by 8 feet tall, and still have it. In fact, right now it's at a church in New York, but my daughter and I painted it, and I have a video on my YouTube channel of how to build a puppet stage like this. It folds like an accordion, but it spreads out, and it's not only a puppet stage, but it's a backdrop for a theme. Right. So anyway, so that's where Caboose came from, and so. And when I moved on from Reading 5 years later, I kept the Caboose name for my itinerant ministry. And so 5 wonderful years in Reading. In fact, the cool thing about the ministry time in Reading was that 3 different churches were interested in children's ministries, but none could afford a children's pastor full-time. So we were at the Hopewell network of churches. Then it was called the Hopewell District. Their church was in the middle of Reading, and that was my home base. That's where Caboose started and was based. But then there was a church on the east side of the city. They wanted children's ministry, so they were called Trinity UCC. And so they provided the housing. They had an old church house right next to the church. So the way they provided for us for what I did for them was housing. 6th and Cherry, or in other words, the main one in Reading, they provided our main, provision. But then there was a church on the west side of Reading called St. James, and they gave so much money a month towards the fund. So it was really, really cool. I rotated every other weekend around a different church. Eventually, the first year I stayed at Reading at Caboose, but then at Trinity UCC. All right, what theme do I pick for Trinity UCC? And then someone years ago had a vision of Trinity being a lighthouse in the community. It's lighthouse. So that became my theme. It was called Trinity Lighthouse with the children's ministry. So I built another giant puppet stage.
That was a lighthouse.
Yes, it's a lighthouse scene. It had a tugboat and a tree fort and a lighthouse. And believe it or not, it's still there. And I have tried more than once to, because sadly it hasn't been used in years, and I'm terrified that they're going to, the church inadvertently will throw it out, and so I have
knowing that somebody loved it.
Oh, mommy! So I told him, hey, I will be happy to pay for it. Just please, if you decide not to get rid of it, let me know. I want to buy it. So I'm still hoping that I can get that. So then in St. James. Well, St. James on the west side, when I finally built a puppet stage and picked a theme for them, their church looks like a castle. So I called them Fort St. James.
Right.
So their puppet stage looks like a big castle. Still exists, and it's being used by another church or another ministry in downtown Reading called the Fortress. So it's really, really cool to get this.
It's fun how it kind of takes those.
Yep, and
transitions.
So anyway, so we were Reading, doing that, but Kim closed like a flower, sadly, in Reading. I was thriving; she was just closing. Reading.
And was this during the 5 years of working on staff?
Yes, during the 5 years, Reading was a real tough city. It was hard to explain. In 1957, on the cover of Time magazine, I think it was called Sin City because of organized crime.
Wow.
And yet Reading's right in the middle of, surrounded by Amish Mennonites. So it was just a mixture, and it was just really hard on Kim. So for her sake, she used to take our 3 children on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights to an Assembly of God church on the west side of town. Glad Tidings, still there, a massive church. And that because Kim grew up in that flavor.
Right.
And so anyway, that was her survival. She would help the youth, and the children, loved it and thrived under it. And so that was Reading. In the meantime, Caboose was also doing several public school assemblies. We weren't allowed to preach the gospel, but I could give motivational talks. We'd use the time machine.
Right.
And an illustrated sermon of a motivational talk. But so my hope was that it would open a door that, they would eventually come to church or whatever.
There'd be some familiarity, and then they know you could take the next step.
Yep. So Reading to me was a gold mine, and still do ministry there from time to time and love it. And so after 5 years at Reading, that was closing down. The new pastor that came wanted me to be his assistant, but I just felt like I was done. And so anyway, I had a church in California. A friend who went to Elim with me, Rick Calhoun, he was on staff at the Vineyard, or the Anaheim Vineyard.
Oh, really? So the original.
Yeah, no, forgive me, or he was connected with it, maybe through a friendship. I don't remember if Rick was there or not. But the children's pastor there was moving on, and Rick recommended me. So Anaheim, we were going to pursue being the children's pastor at Anaheim Vineyard, and then they did something very out of character for them, or out of practice. They decided to hire someone in-house.
This is the Anaheim Vineyard.
Anaheim Vineyard. So, okay, but then somehow the Desert Vineyard, which was in near Edwards Air Force Base out in California, they heard about us, and they were very interested. So they flew Kim and me out there.
Correct me. And I don't know where the story's going, but who was it earlier in the story? I think you were saying Paul Johansson was talking to Kim years before that. Oh, my
dear.
And said, well, if he calls you out to California, go to California.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's I've never connected it with that, but that didn't happen. But that's amazing. You picked that up. I'd never made that connection, and so what happened was they flew us out there for 6 days, and it was everything I wanted in a church for years. I mean, I had a little ponytail. My daughter says it's a mullet, but my daughter, she's the one most like. She's my mini me, but she say it's a mullet. It probably was, but anyway. So we were there, and this is everything I ever wanted. They met in some kind of, I don't even know what it was, a building in like maybe the state fair, and they would have line dancing on Saturday nights at the church. And if you want to creep Guerty out, just mention line dancing. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm sorry, people, but it just creeps me out. And they was like, oh my dear, line dancing. I just can't even the thought. I don't know. It's fingernails on a blackboard. Please, people, no emails, no texts. But anyway, they did that because they were trying to reach the community.
Right. Of course.
So So anyway, I interviewed, and I visited their children's church on Sunday morning, and that was during the time when that song was very popular. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, glory to the Holy of Holies. It was a very popular Vineyard song, and so the kids were waving flags in church and stuff,
Fun.
So anyway, remember that very vividly. So anyway, the Sunday night service, I was at the back of the church, kneeling on my knees at a chair, just asking the Lord, is this your will for us, Lord? And man, I had the biggest, strongest, deepest no.
Wow.
I was so crushed. I fell apart.
Because you knew this was everything you wanted.
And it was no.
Wow.
And I'm still embarrassed to this day, and that was October of 1995. So what is that going to be, 30 years next year? But when I told the pastor, I just fell apart like a bawling baby.
Wow.
And
because they were ready to invite you?
Yes. And I'm I still feel embarrassed about it, but he said, do you always react this way? And it's like, it was my dream church.
You do when it's a dream.
And I love hot, dry, sunny weather. I envy the desert. I want to move to Phoenix. And I even went running, out in the, in like a desert place there. Maybe it was behind the hotel. And I was, so the bummer was that not only did I fall apart, but we still had another day or two to be there.
Right.
And so I did like a children's workers seminar at a home while we were there. And so I waited for God to change his mind. I don't know how long it was. It was a long time, weeks, and just agonizing and just hoping the Lord would change. He doesn't often change his mind.
Right.
So anyway, this connects to Delaware. They were looking for a children's pastor, and there was an Elim. They used to have the Elim regional meeting for Elim people at Sandy Cove. which is not, I don't know, 35 miles south of Wilmington.
Right.
And I used to go to it. And but Emmanuel Baptist Church at the time, they were looking for a children's pastor, though they were Emmanuel Baptist, they were charismatic, had been for decades.
Right.
So anyway, one of their head pastor, Dave Appleby, he went up to Mark Nelson. I don't know if Mark Nelson's father, Tom, was in EF leadership for years.
I know of them, yeah.
Well, he goes up to Mark, you know anybody, you know any good children's pastors? And Mark goes, we see that guy over there? And he pointed to me.
Right.
He goes, that guy's a children's pastor and he's looking for a job, you know. So Pastor Dave and the youth pastor at the time, Chris Kroger, they came over and they started talking to me and, you know, telling me about Emmanuel and asking if I'd be interested. And so my heart was still for
Still hoping
California.
God would change his mind.
Yes, for Vineyard. Right. And it's so funny. It reminds me, some of the baby boomers who are watching will remember Dudley Do-Right, the cartoon.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember, but Nell, his girlfriend.
Canadian, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's Canadian rock. But I've thought of this many times, but Nell loved his horse.
Right.
So here, Dudley would be there posing and holding Nell, but she would be petting his horse. So here, Emmanuel's trying to get Guerty to come to be the kids' pastor, but I was still loving Anaheim.
Petting the horse,
No,
yeah.
not Anaheim, forgive me, the Desert Vineyard. And so anyway, Pastor Dave was so gracious, and he waited and waited and waited. And so here comes Brother Joe again.
Yeah.
So I call Brother Joe, and I'm just telling him my debacle, and he goes, Brother Joe, but I want to, this is what happened in California, and I just want to be part of a church that's relevant to the culture. Right. And here he comes. Who's going to take care of the people who aren't relevant to the culture? Who's going to take care of them? And I'm like, and once again, he got me again. Right. So who's going to take care of them? And I'm like, oh, man. And so,
I was going to say, I don't know if that fits, because that's more than 3 words. Who's going to take care of them?
Yeah, who's going to take care of those the churches who aren't relevant to the culture? Who's going to take care of them? And so I'm like, wow. So anyway, he got me again.
Yeah.
But again, I felt so badly. But through the years, if we, when it was really, really bad, I would always call him. And I always was worried. I hate to call him because I don't want to bug him. He's got a million people and million things to do. But when it was bad, I'd call Brother Joe. Mm-hmm. So anyway, after that,
sounds like he could get to the heart of the matter quick anyway.
He would, and he. Yeah. So anyway, So after that, I called Pastor Dave at Emmanuel and said, and I'll never forget what Dave said. I said, "Hey, bro, I don't know if you're still interested." We'd be interested in coming to Emmanuel. And Brother Dave goes in his soft voice, he goes, we'd be delighted. That's exactly what he said.
And then your path to Delaware was set at that point.
So that's how we wound up at Emmanuel. And so what happened there is that I started at Emmanuel in February 1996. But what we would do is that I would drive to Emmanuel and stay. They had a big, massive church house next to the church building. And my office was in the church house on the top floor. And of course, a number of offices were there. But anyway, I had a bed in there. I would sleep in my office. And so Kim and the kids, we'd all come down as a family on Sunday morning for service. And then Kim and the kids on Sunday night would go back to Reading. I would stay in my office till Wednesday night. They would come for church Wednesday night, and then we'd all go home.
Right.
And so we would do that for like almost 2 months. And then...
So this was just in the transition time.
And so... and Pastor Dave, I had some real struggles that I was going through at our church in Reading. And... So I just needed time to just chill and heal, and of course I'm sure I was still reeling from the California no.
Right.
And so anyway, Pastor Dave was so patient and gentle with me, and he just let me just come and not have to do anything. Yeah. And at that time, the renewal movement that started in Toronto, and then Brother Ray Sell was the one the Lord used to bring it to Elim.
Right.
Well, that same thing, I think Emmanuel sent some elders up to that. And they brought it to Emmanuel. Or I think the elders said, Lord, we don't need to go to Toronto for this. If you have this for us, Lord, bring it to Emmanuel. And he did.
Right.
So that was going on when we arrived at Emmanuel. And so I would just...
It would have been 95.
Well, at Emmanuel it was 96. I think it was, forgive me, it was there before I got there, so I'm sure 95. So I would just go to meetings and lay on my face and adore the Lord and get healed. And But after a while, Pastor Dave, and rightly so, who wants to leave the presence of the Lord and do nothing and chill?
Right.
But after a while, Pastor Dave said, people were wondering when you're going to get things started, and he was right. So then I started building children's ministries there.
But it sounded like you just needed that season of refreshing.
I did.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing that happened in Reading. When I got to Reading, I was really, really hurting when I got to Reading, to my shame, but I was. I wanted to get out of the ministry at one point, and Kim said, Michael, if you do that in 3 weeks, you'll be miserable. All I wanted to do was push a broom in a 7-Eleven. That's where I was at.
Right. But you're just kind of done for a season.
Done for a season,
but that's interesting, because I've always heard somebody say that you could really tell a man or a person's quality is what they do when they're told no, as opposed to yes. And I think the same. You can really tell your relationship with God what you do with a no.
Yep. And you really find out how submissive you are when you're told no, especially by another human being, by not just the Lord,
Right.
But so the Calvin Kurtz was my pastor in Reading, and he was grew up on a farm, was a farmer, a dairy farmer for decades before he went into the ministry. But it was perfect for me. He had me there to minister to the children, but I was there whether he knew it or not, and I was healing under his soft, gentle leadership. So I was doing lots of children's ministries, but I was healing under Calvin, so that was really cool.
Right.
And so anyway, we got to Emmanuel, and of course, there I am again.
Right.
All right, Lord, what do I name Children's Church in Emmanuel? And I was trying to think of Delaware history and whatnot. So I don't remember how, but the first theme we picked was Nugget Town.
Nugget Town.
I think I know. I think I know why. Pondering Delaware. All right, Delaware has 3 nicknames. Its main one is called the Diamond State. To this day, I don't know why, and I've lived there almost 28 years. I think my theory is that it's the second smallest state and the flattest, but I think maybe it's small and valuable is maybe where diamond comes from.
But they're not known for the diamonds, then.
I haven't found any. Yeah. But so the Diamond State, it's also called the first state. Forgive me, the first state is because they were the first to ratify the Constitution, and Pennsylvania did the next day, but Delaware is the first state. And then the third nickname is Small Wonder, the Small Wonder. So anyway, I'm pondering these things as what do I do? And so I picked for elementary age that I would be overseeing was Diamond State, the Diamond State Mine, the Diamond Mine. So that became upper elementary, the Diamond Mine. And so what I did, though, was we had to build the first puppet stage first for the younger ones and for everybody at first. So I thought, well, what about this mine theme, diamond? So what we named, this is my recollection, we named the first puppet stage, and the theme was Nugget Town.
Nugget Town, right.
So it was a small western town. And so we did... When I got there to Delaware, we did like 1st through 6th grade, all in Nugget Town. Took an old classroom, Sunday school classroom, totally painted it, made it my own, and that became Nugget Town. But my immediate goal, as every children's church I had, was to split the elementary age, have the lower elementary go with other teachers. My gifting and focus was upper elementary. So that was always my goal, was to split a church as soon as I could. And so anyway, Howard Cox was my right-hand man at Emmanuel, one of the most anointed, gifted people I've ever seen. And when I hear him teach, I was like lapping it up, and he kept my attention. That's how I knew he was anointed.
Wow.
And I could sit under him and listen to him talk for hours. So anyway, he was my right-hand man. So when Diamond Mine was going, I had Howard take the younger age, and I built Diamond Mine. And so Diamond Mine, we met in the church basement. Howard met in that classroom upstairs on the main floor. And so Diamond State Mine, so both were 16 feet wide, 8 feet tall, just like they always made them.
So it sounds like you had sort of a template, but then it looked different.
Yep, and that's where I made the video recording of how to build a puppet stage. I did it while I had a manual in the basement, and I think it was for when I was building the Diamond Mine one, if I remember right. But anyway, so I left Howard with Nugget Town. He had helpers with him, and then I had my own team, Diamond Mine. We met in the basement, and then the Diamond Mine was just like it says. It was a diamond mine, and the beautiful thing now, decades later, Nugget Town is now being used by a church in Pennsylvania, and Diamond Mine is being used by another church in downstate in Delaware. So I just love seeing them reused.
Right.
So anyway,
because they were all the same design, had them fold up, so you
fold up like an accordion. Put them on casters,
right?
And you use paneling, not plywood, so they're very light. I could carry one on its side if I had to,
right.
by myself. So let's just say the ideal, in my thinking, for a children's church in a church is to have their own place.
Right, of course.
You know, so
dedicated
but
space.
In a scenario, and it's not uncommon where they don't have their own place, they can fold it up and it rolls in a corner.
Right,
and you know,
and you can set it up on a Sunday and good to go. Yeah.
Yep. And so for kids' church, like we would do crazy things in the first half of the time together, where I'd have a giant 6-foot cage ball that you usually see out in the field.
Right.
We'd fill it up in Diamond Mine, and it would be on the other side of. We had the whole fellowship hall, and it was huge. And I got those rolling barricades. The elders said I could have them. You know, they bought them for me, and so I could have the chapel, so to speak, and then the playground.
Right.
So we would do cage ball. I would have relay races down the hallway with trash cans with wheels and kitchen carts and bicycles. And so we'd crank movie music and screaming kids, and I just play with them.
Right.
And when we play, we play. When we pray, we pray. And so just anything we could do to have a blast with the kids and have a relationship with them. Because Calvin taught me at Reading in Caboose, relationship should always precede ministry.
Right.
If possible. And so we would do.
But it's interesting too that part of your personality of saying, I'm a kid.
Yep.
Stuck in a body. I do the same. Yes, it's relationship, but it's also who you're built for. And I think you can have that relationship because you're both having fun.
Yep.
You're having fun.
Yep. And that's another thing that would come out with this creative thing. I really believe because the dad's not letting us watch TV. I've made so many Bible games out of wood and paint and Christmas lights.
Wow.
And they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I would try to make. And I still do, even with our kids' camp chapel every summer, I try to make our children's church area a Christian Chuck E. Cheese.
That's a good way to put
props
it. I love that.
Everywhere.
Lights, sound, music.
Yep. A wonderland. Yeah. We try to make it a wonderland for the children. I tell my setup team, let's make it look like a Christian Chuck E. Cheese, and that's what we do. But don't be fooled by its appearance. All week long, these kids will get Christ and Him crucified, Christ-centered doctrine by a plethora of teachers. Come, Lord Jesus, come. We wait for you, Lord. And people can be easily. What word do I use? Easily get presuppositions that are wrong because I see that and they say, "Oh, this is playtime, kitty, kitty."
Right.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
They don't know the depth that you.
They don't know.
In it.
This is when we play, we play, but when we pray, we pray. So we'd have that fun, and they had puppet shows, time machine characters. But then when it came time to approach the Lord, it was total reverence. Right. Boys, hats off. We honor the presence of the Lord, and I say this at kids' church and in camps every year. Gentlemen, we're going to take our hats off whenever we're in chapel to honor the presence of the Lord, and we also take our hats off in a room in the presence of a lady. And you guys don't realize this. You'd never know if your future wife is sitting over there and they all go, because it's kids camp. And teen camp, they may go, yo.
Oh, maybe.
And I always use a dear little brother and friend who's not so little anymore, but he met his wife at camp. And I just tell them it could happen. So we breed reverence in them immediately. And that's why when we're in a children's church service, I separate the boys and girls. They sit by gender, only two, binary. And so we sit them that way. Why? Because praise the Lord, it doesn't work with youth and teens, but it works with children. It's usually a boy who gets out of hand, you have them sit with the girls, and it works wonders. When they want to sit over there, you send them to the youth pastor. But it usually works wonders, and after a while, you just bring them back. Okay, honey, you can go back and sit with the boys. But you do it for that reason,
Yeah.
And so you separate them, and then when we approach the Lord, no talking at all. We're not, the only talking we're doing is to the Lord. And I would start just waiting on the Lord, playing on my guitar, just, not rushing into something, as too often it happens.
Right.
I'm so sick of it. Forgive me, I'm on a soapbox, but so many things are packaged, it just drives me crazy and hypey. But you know what? We want to wait before we approach the Lord, realize what we're doing. It's the Lord of the universe, and as we do, and then we just take our time reverently. We begin to minister to him. And it got to the place where as the children, they're just like adults, they mature and they grow in the Lord. And it was so wonderful that I didn't even have to say anything. And as I started to minister to the Lord, as we were approaching the Lord in worship and song, the kids on their own volition would get on their faces before God. Wow. And I know it drives me crazy too that so many times, revival's breaking out among children. And all it was children imitating adults. And Gertie, no, I believe in God moving among children. I would stop working with them. Right. But so many times, they're just, because they're children, they mimic adults. And so many adults and people hype it up and who don't understand. And forgive me, they mean well, but it just drives me crazy when what they think is revival is not. And believe me, I've been working with children since 1986. So, and I want to till the day I die. But I'm saying, I think I'm for the real thing.
Right.
I want the real thing, Well,
I had a youth pastor that used to say, fly, especially during the Toronto Blessing, because we were teenagers there, we would go, and he would say, fly as high as God and the Spirit will take you. But when you hit the ground, you got to walk straight. And I said, that stuck with me. So it says, have all the experiences, but the experiences need to take you someplace, and that's closer to
there you go.
Walk with God. So
and
we do the same with kids.
That's right. Amen. And buddy, I'm so glad you said that, because we had the honor to, when Elim, for decades had camp meeting in the summer,
right.
And a couple of times at least, they invited Kim and the kids and me to minister to the children during camp meetings. So we would do it in College Hall Chapel on the top floor. And what a huge honor was one year, Brother Johansson's identical twin grandsons were there. Never forget it. But one of those years, and I think it was 1994, the same year we did Creation, was that it was when the renewal and the Toronto Blessing stuff was happening at Elim, and just, I was like, and Brother Joe had an awesome word about it. We'll let this hit our sails, but we're not going to let it direct our course. That's, classic Brother Joe.
Right.
But anyway, what I saw, it was hurting us in children's ministries, because our goal was to get the Word of God, which is the source of the power, of course, with the Spirit. Right. But the kids were just doing what they saw the parents do, like praying for each other. And of course we want children praying for each other, but it looked too much like mimicry of what they saw in the adult services.
And then the idea that this is what you would do if you're spiritual, so you have to do it.
Exactly.
Which is the trapping of it. Yeah.
Yep, so I'll never forget, I just had to stop one kid from doing it. I still see him in my mind, and this was, 30 years ago. But, because you're going to hear me harp on it till the day I die, but it's like the experiences we have got to be based and rooted and incited by a response to the Word, And it's so easy to hype children and teenagers up. It happens all the time. It drives me crazy. But I want our camps and our children's services to be text-driven. And of course we entreat the Lord, His Spirit to come. But that's, I don't know, a lot of people can't relate because they're too young. But the movie Aladdin, 1992, in the opening scene, Jafar is out in the desert at night with this real creepy, evil guy, and they each have a half of the golden scarab or the golden beetle. Right. And, the first thing, of course, Jafar says to him, "You are late. I had to slit a few throats to get it." And so anyway, they both have a half of the golden beetle. Right. And each half is solid gold, and each half by itself is worth who knows what, invaluable. Right. But you see, and I use this illustration, I've used it for so many years, but what happens, I ask the audiences, what happened when they put the two pieces together? I said, what's the first thing that happened? And when they get it right, they say, it glowed. Exactly. It glowed. So you have the Word of God and you have the Spirit of God.
Right.
And it says, many people are so, Word in the knowledge, but they're so critical and, critical and cynical of everything.
Right.
But you have people who are so Spirit experience chasing oriented. They're so flaky, and they get into a lot of error easily. Mm-hmm. But I said, here's what you do. We want with our ministry the golden beetle to be joined both halves. Wow. And then I say, what happened? It glowed. And then I say, what did it do? And you love pulling it out of the audience as they try to remember the movie.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, it flew. And I say, where did it fly to? And then they'll pause, and most of them don't remember, but somebody will say, the Cave of Wonders. Remember? Remember when Jafar sees it, the Cave of Wonders. Yeah. And that's what I tell kids and adults, beloved, when you have those two, that golden blend, when it glows and you see the text and the light of the Holy Spirit's illumination, he takes you to the Cave of Wonders. Wow. And so...
And this is beautiful because this is your story in itself. When you came to Elim, you said you were the flakiest one there, but you had passion, so you came with the passion, but then you needed a season to dive into the Word. So it's like one without the other is missing half.
Isn't it easy, Bo, to just go either way, but anyway, so that was the goal. So when we approached God, we did it reverently, and again, like I told you earlier, they would get theology and verse-by-verse exposition, and of course topical sermons too, and then just trust the Spirit of the Lord that He's going to move on the hearts of these precious ones. And then oftentimes the service would conclude, and the children on their faces just laying before the Lord, responding to the Word. That is our goal. Every evening chapel at every camp and we always tell the staff, we are not going to try to make anything happen. That happens too often, and then it means nothing. But when they're responding to the text, camp affords that time. You have time. It isn't a church service where you have to go home and your parents are waiting for you. Right. At camp, you can take as much time as you want. And the way I put it, and I have for decades, is I want the campers to adore on the floor, without doing anything to manipulate them. And that's easy to do, especially with young people. Right. So anyway, that's what happened in Delaware. And then it was so funny when I thought my time at Delaware was done. Guess who I called? Called Brother Joe. Yeah. and I think, I don't know if I shared it earlier in our time, but that was when, I think I said this at the very beginnings, and about when I was done at Emmanuel, I was going to take that try to find a youth pastor, remember? Right. And do both. And that's when, again, we conferred with Brother Joe, and I forget who else. In fact, Dave Hess, whose daughter Bethany went to Elim. Dave pastors Christ Community Chapel in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, connected with Elim. Right. Well, Dave was interested in me being his children's pastor, and it would have been a huge honor, like going to Bethel. Wow. But so I did interview with him.
And where was his church?
This is in Camp Hill, south of Harrisburg. Okay. And right on Route 15. And so we did interview with him, and I just, we had already kind of decided to do the itinerant work, but, but it was an honor that a brother like Dave would be interested, and I hope that's not name dropping, but Dave was just, and he's one of the overseers of the Hopewell network of churches that I have been doing camps for since 1991. So
this would have been, and this is what I want to kind of explore a little bit. So you're finishing up at Emmanuel. You have this opportunity to continue what you're doing, kids ministry, in a big way again. But there's something else on the table, this itinerant. How did that come about?
And you know what? Forgive me, when you talk, bro, this brings back a very, very important connection with California that I saw later, and I thank the Lord a million times that He didn't let me go, is that what happened was when we came to Reading, the man who started the Hopewell Network camps that I've been doing since 1991, he was moving out of the area. this church and the network had heard that I had done camps. Would you please take over for this man, Dean Landis? In fact, he texted me this morning. Dean Landis, is leaving the area. We heard you've done camps. And up to that time, I had done like 7 years of camps, 7 summers, whatever. And so, why are you saying that, Gert? Here's why, is because that started my tenure at Hopewell Summer Camps, which is like the love of my life, and every outlet in my personality and giftings and graces and anointings in God have their outlet at Hopewell Summer Camps. Everything, from drama to preaching to teaching to shepherding to building things. So and horseback riding and dramas.
Wow, so 21 it's kind
years
of the culmination of all the skills and passions and.
So here's what would have happened.
Yeah.
If I would have taken California, I would have only been at Tel High for 5 years. But because it was, I've had the honor to be there for 30-something years. And the glory of that I never knew as a children's pastor, because my average tenure was under 3 years at a church.
Right.
The glory and beauty of being at Tel High for 30-plus years is that you see the generations. So campers of campers are coming, and you see by staying in one place. And I cannot now, nothing personal, Elim, but now the chapel at Tel High Camp is more precious and sacred to me than the tabernacle at Elim. And the tabernacle at Elim is very sacred.
Right.
But I've often said I want to be buried, if it was possible, at Tel High Camp near that building. That's why? Because I've been on my face and in the glory and presence of God with teenagers and children for over 30 years in that sacred little building. That's nothing, Hemlock Hall, that's nothing to write home about.
Right.
But because, the presence of God is there.
Right.
So that was the connection. Like, thank you, Lord, you didn't give me California.
Right. You would have never known.
Never known.
And that's sort of interesting that God did that in, as a pastor might go to a church for 30 years and be able to put down roots, but as a kids pastor, going to all these places, knowing the time's up, what's the through line there? But then God gave you something that was, even though you're traveling, you have 30 years of seeing the generations, and that's a gift.
And so many of the little boys and girls, bro, that were in kids' church with me as little boys and girls have been by my side for years, helping me do the Lord's work. And now their children come to camp.
Right.
It's like, oh my dear. So forgive me. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss that. And and so your question about the itinerant was. I was feeling at the end of my tenure at Emmanuel is that I feel like the dramas and the messages I'm getting are too intense for children. So I wanted to do ministry not to children exclusively, though it wasn't exclusively. I was still doing outside ministry from time to time, but, Sunday to Sunday, it was mostly children. And it was funny, when we got to Emmanuel, we didn't have conditions, but we had requests, because I did feel... I had things in me for more than just kids only. So the elders said, you can go out twice a month. Just, but I never did. Not because, it was just that I got so immersed in all the work there was to do at Emmanuel, and it didn't bother me. But
at
anyway,
least they had given me sort of the door, and you could start thinking in that way, even if you didn't.
Yep, and the brothers were so good to me, always were. I was under their wing all those years and felt, we went to Emmanuel for 21 years. I was in kids pastor 4 years. And to this day, I have great relationships with the brothers. And so anyway, as far as the itinerant, it was so funny. When we were feeling this, Brother Joe told me, you need to write a newsletter. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm not a promoter, and I'm not a fundraiser. I'm like, come on, Brother Joe, come on. No. You won't be able to survive on the honoraria you get from where you go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, come. And everything in me was dying. Like, this is so not me. Cringing. But, of course, because of my love and respect for him, I did it.
Yeah.
So I have been writing a monthly newsletter every single month since February of 2000. But Brother
It's
Joe,
funny because we get it every month. I was talking to somebody at Bethel, and they're saying, "Yeah, well, we keep up because of the newsletter."
Well, it's funny. I have to be honest. Brother Joe said, "You're writing epistles," because I would be burdened through the decades.
Yeah.
I'm burdened to share what I'm seeing in the Word and the burdens of my heart, So many newsletters are preaching, and but it's a tension. I want to both feed people, but also keep them informed what I'm doing.
Right.
So that's the tension every
bit of
year,
both,
every month, I should say.
I know during COVID, it was.
I was doing cab talks.
Cab talks. That's what it was. It wasn't the newsletter. It was cab talks.
Cab talks. They were when our church closed, Emmanuel closed down for COVID. We used to meet every Wednesday night in Tab, called Tabernacle of David, Tab for short. It was just an hour or so of worship and intercession. No preaching or teaching. It was just, and I loved it. Went every basically week I could, and I would a number of times lead worship for it. But anyway, when COVID started, one of the elders, or it might have been the Ryan Diffenderfer, who's just a very dear little brother in the Lord. He was one of the assistant pastors at Emmanuel, and one of the finest young men I've ever seen. But he asked me, would you put together a devotional, I think he and another elder, a video devotional for Emmanuel for Good Friday of COVID year.
Right.
I said, sure. So I filmed one, and then I did it and sent it out, but then I felt to ask the elders, hey, do you want me to produce one of these like every Wednesday for the people who would normally come to Tab? And 15 minutes, and I'll call them Tab Talks. Excuse me. And so they said, go for it. So every Wednesday for, I don't know, well over a year, I would make Tab Talks. When I moved on from Emmanuel, I changed them to Cab Talks, cab short for caboose.
Right.
All right? And so I think the first series I did was Hebrews chapter 1, just Hebrews 1. And then I went into Colossians, and I was going to do Colossians 1, like verses 12 through 19, and I only got through verse 12. I mean, and then I would do topical stuff like the adorable wrath of God, just a whole series, and people hear the wrath of God, change the subject. No. You will rob God of his glory, and you will rob yourself of adoration and the awesome fear of the Lord that draws you to him, not push you away from him, by adoring him via his wrath. Some of my deepest times of communion and adoration of God have been meditating and studying on his wrath, because why? I'm not under it anymore. But if you don't realize how fierce and furious and intense it is, you're not appreciative of being saved from it. So anyway, so I think I did like 64 cab talks that are all on my YouTube channel. And also making a puppet show every single week for kids who couldn't go to church because they were quarantined. You know what I mean? Churches were closed. So it was Kim's idea. And it was called my trademark puppet Chip. And I bought him in 91 when I started Caboose. And so Kim's the one, because when I was not on the road doing itinerant work, if I was at Emmanuel on a Sunday, I would do Chip puppet shows for the nursery, toddlers, and elementary age. And so when COVID started, Kim said, Michael, you need to send Chip videos to these kids who can't come to church. And I'm like, nah, I'm not, nah. And I don't know how many times she asked me, and about 2 weeks later, I started doing them every single week.
Oh, fun.
And so it was called Chip Sunday Show, and I probably made them almost every single Sunday for a year and a half. And I'll be honest, probably maybe longer than that. So I might have 100 puppet shows on my YouTube channel, but he has as many adult fans as children fans, I think, because it sounds like kitty, this is boring, but many of my guest stars on Chip would be adults. They're the best ones. And many of my neighbors who aren't even Christians, I would film Chip shows with them. So, and then on Sunday morning, I would send it to our neighbors on our street, and just have a lot of fun with him. So, sorry I got into that rabbit trail, but you told me
rabbit trails are invited.
That was a chipmunk trail.
Chipmunk trail. So we've gone on a skunk trail, a chipmunk trail.
Wow. I'm sure you weren't expecting the skunk trail, but that's what you told me when we started.
Beautiful. It's cool.
The itinerant work, right?
So how did that launch? From that time of Emmanuel, you saw these two paths in front of you, but it feels like at this time you have built up enough, base. You've built up enough, people interested that, it was a time to jump into that.
Yeah, well, again, here we're talking about the providence of God, is that by being at all these different churches, over, each about, again, averaged under 3 years, you had so many relationships with people through camps. I did, all those churches I did camps with.
Right.
And that, so you had relationship with the kids and with their parents. So if we said, hey, if you want to help us do the Lord's work, they knew who I was.
Right.
And not only do we attend the same church, they were our friends. Hey, Michael and Kim ministered to their children. So it kind of laid the groundwork, though, of course, when we were doing children's ministries at all these churches, we had no idea we were going to be itinerant,
Right. You weren't building up your base on purpose.
No, not at all.
But it happened nonetheless.
And believe me, I died 1,000 deaths. I've never charged a fee in 24 years, never will. Wow. I've had certain people say, I should, but I just can't. So I don't know how many times in these 24 years I've done ministry for nothing, and I don't care. It's a joy, because many times there's not a lot of money in children and youth ministry. So it's like, when people ask, what do you charge? I said, nothing. It's nice if you have your expenses covered, but many times that hasn't happened, and it's okay, or a number of times.
The best joke I heard was, what's the difference between a kid's pastor and a U.S. savings bond? Well, the answer is a U.S. saving bond. At least one of them will eventually mature and make money.
That's great. That's great. And so, you know what I mean? I do it with joy, and it's just that, I always tell my host that, the bottom line is not making money. The bottom line is getting the Word of God into people, young and old. And I can't count the host that ministry host or pastors, that I tell them, look at me. Look, I look in their eyes and I say, if you need ministry and you don't have a dime, call me. I'm there for you. Right. And it's just the way and I know that's a gift. If God pulled that gift of faith for that out of me, I'd be like, oh no, but I don't know, it's done with joy. I know my days are numbered, and I'm driven to do what I do as long as I can, to as many people as I can reach. Right.
I remember Stacy Klein. I talked to him in his last few months. He was still teaching. My son was at school. I said, why are you still teaching? He goes, well, I want to leave everything on the ice. My time is limited. I want everything on the ice when I leave, which is a hockey term, of course.
Jesus.
But, it's beautiful.
Wow, that's heavy. Yep. I do. I feel driven. I have to admit it. It's like, you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I've told the Lord many times, Lord, if you take me from children and teens, just take me home. Just take me home, Lord. And it doesn't mean I minister to adults, maybe more, I don't know, just as much, but there's something precious about the young ones that I would be sick if I couldn't be with them. And you put me in a room full of kids, I feel like I'm doing what I'm made for. But but again, I do tons of adult ministry, and it's very precious too. But in the same way that I do with children,
I think once you see it, that's what I tell people at a church. Why do you do kids ministry? You have all this training. Why kids? And I say, once you see it, it can never be unseen.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
And I think that's every kid's pastor that says this is not just a stepping stone. Well, no, you'll get a chance to do all the others. That's great, but there'll be something here that once you see it, that's where your heart is. So I think I always think of you when I do that.
And guess what? Thanks, buddy. And guess what happened? I forgot to tell you this, and this is huge. I didn't tell you this, but when Pastor Ron at Bethel was interviewing me and trying to get the rest of the board to accept me, and he was trying to do all he could, and bless his heart. So anyway, so I did reluctantly accept the job, with really wanting to pastor adults, but it was almost like the Lord said, "The joke's on you. I have called you to kids."
Right.
So.
Right.
But and I haven't regretted a day of it. Oh my dear. Well, you know what it's like. We're talking. We're in the echo chamber here,
Right.
but. It's like glorious. There's nowhere else I'd rather be in all of Christendom than at the altar with a broken kid or teenager. Story's over. Turn the cameras off. What else is there to say?
This is what you're made for.
What we were made for,
So tell me now. So unless there's some other stories along the way, which we have rabbit trails and lots of film left. So, but at least tell me now. What does your years look like now? Like I feel like every time I talk to you, you're getting ready for something new or trying to recover from the last thing. It's.
Yeah, I just had the busiest February my entire life, not just ministry. When it was like I think 5 out of 6 weekends we were out doing some kind of ministry or ministry related. But so now I was. And I've been in a lull, but in a way how do I say this? Via Dolorosa.
And that's an avenue we have to go back and I want to hear that from the beginning.
Well, this has to do with what you asked, but Via Dolorosa, I would say it's just about exactly equal in love in my heart to summer camps, and it started by Pastor Bill Breon, my former pastor at Emmanuel, and in 2004 he started it at our church. Inspired by the Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson's movie, and he just wanted it to be a meditative, contemplative walkthrough, where people just came to church, and there were 4 different stations where they just, came into a room, and they just meditated on the Lord's Passion. So,
obviously, around Easter time.
Yep.
Building towards that.
And the first year we did it, we only had one night. It was Good Friday. And so he asked me the very first year if I would do pilot. And, of course, I had done pilot for years by then. But it was, so I did my pilot scene. And I forget what the other rooms were. One might have been the Garden of Gethsemane. Another one was... Maybe that was the dungeon the very first year too, and then there was one other. So every year Via just grew and grew and grew to where we were up to 4 nights. The first year only 60 people came, but we almost got 1,000 people in its heyday.
And they would walk through a room. They would have the scene in front of them. Then they would go to the next room.
They would come to our church, and we would morph our church into first century Jerusalem. It took about 2 weeks or more to set up for it. Wow. When you got in the building, you lost all sense of time. You felt like you were sucked in. It was like a zone. In fact, even a number of years, we had Pilate's horse outside in the courtyard.
Wow.
This dear woman lent us her horse. She would come in a costume.
Right.
And so you never see Pilate with his horse because he was in the Fortress Antonia.
This is where he had left it.
He had left it.
Yeah.
And so, you people would come, and they would get in, and they'd have the welcome tent, and one of our elders in costume would orient them about what they were going to see and what was happening in Jerusalem. They would leave the tent, and then there'd be Roman soldiers with a zealot prisoner roughing him up and putting him in chains. There was a fire pit there. They'd cook food, and then they'd stop. They go, "You, where are you going?" And the guests would be so startled, So I'd always tell the actors, brothers, you can enter into their time zone. In other words, you can speak to them, but they can't enter into yours. So no matter what they do or say, it's like you don't hear them or see them. Right. So they would do that, and one of my little buddies, who was a little boy in kids' church with me, and now married man, but he was one of my soldiers, and he stopped his mother.
Yeah.
And she was trying to talk to him, Bo, and he would totally ignore her. And she got mad at him, if I remember right, Bo. But Bo did what I wanted him to do. You don't enter their time zone.
Right.
And so anyway.
So you could talk to the fourth wall, but the fourth wall can't talk to you.
They could not talk to you. And so they'd startle the guest and scare them, and they'd rough up the zealot and chain him and really rough him, where he was even bleeding one time from them throwing him to the ground. And so they go in the building, they go up the stairs, and they go to the marketplace. It was the Jewish marketplace. They have all these wares and produce, whatever, and then the woman there would just, welcome to the Jewish marketplace, and she'd start telling stories about what was going on. Did you hear about what Jesus did, such and such?
Wow.
And so the average time that the guests were supposed to be in a room is 8 minutes. Excuse me. And so after the marketplace, they would go to the Last Supper, and you'd see the Lord having the Last Supper, washing Peter's feet, washing the disciples' feet. He would institute the Lord's Supper. He would speak to Judas about the betrayal. And by the way, I just recently posted on my YouTube channel 4 different years of Via, the filming of it, and tweaked it and edited it and added captions for what they're seeing. So anyway, then when they leave the Lord's Supper, then they would go into the Garden of Gethsemane, and then a disciple would come in there. Did you see what happened? And he would, relate stories, and then he'd leave, and Judas would come in. And you would have done the same thing too. He points right at the guest,
wow.
And he's, what have I done? And he's remorse, and he has the money.
Would you have the same actor from the one scene?
They'd have different scenes. They'd have to use double, and they'd have to switch actors.
Wow. Right.
Yep. So
this was a well-oiled machine.
Oh my dear, it got this. Oh, buddy, I don't know if you wanted to go in this rabbit trail, because this is one I could stay on for days, and I'm still in mourning about it, since this again is the first year in 20 years I haven't done it, not counting COVID. So I'm still in mourning. I really feel like I lost a baby. Excuse me, but. Then you would go down the next room, and that was the Sanhedrin, and you'd have the Ark of the Covenant there. It looks just like a real one. And it's Sanhedrin, and they'd bring Jesus in, and they'd do what just the scriptures say and mock him, and there'd be Judas's money on the ground, and the servant girl would pick it up, and then Peter'd come in, and he'd get accused. You'd hear the rooster crow.
Wow.
And after that, they'd send him over to Herod. And then across the hall was Herod's palace, and he would be full of debauchery. And we had a dancing girl. One of the hardest things every year at Via was finding a dancing girl. But we had a dancing girl. Away from you, bore me.
Right.
But he'd be drinking and drunk, and I had Herodias with him, and they would be, just you could tell. The audience could tell there was tension between them. That even though he took his brother's wife, they didn't like each other.
Right.
What are you going to do now, pompous one? So she would mock him, and then he would start talking about Jesus. And the guards, I always wanted big guys for the guards, because they would, and you could, again, to see it on YouTube is really scare the daylights out of you. The guards would scare the people to death,
Wow.
And the king would say, "Guards, search the crowd for weapons." "It is done, your majesty." And these guys had scimitars, and they were breastplates, and I had made the breastplates, believe it or not, from a tractor trailer heat shield.
I remember seeing that online, just being so impressed
where
that
I
you
found
could do
it.
that. Again, this came back to the time you spent as a kid.
And the shields might be from tractor trailer hubcaps that I found, and I'd cover them with leather and metal so they did, and if a guest said, "Isn't that a hubcap?" I felt like I failed.
Right. Yeah, to make it.
So after
everything was in the moment, you were there.
You were there, and one of the highest compliments of the many, and I would record them all that I got about Via in my newsletters through the years.
Yeah.
But one of the most precious to me was the friend of a sister at Emmanuel. She came for the first time, and she told her friend later, here it is, another church drama. I've seen a million of them, so to speak. But she said it wasn't long before I got lost in Via, and it wasn't like any church drama. Right. And she just got sucked in, and so after Herod, you'd go down the stairs, and it was the Roman dungeon hallway, and I had taken the actual clips from King of Kings in the scene, and I watched King of Kings every year for decades, love it. Mm-hmm. But they had a bunch of zealots in part of this, one of the scenes where they're making weapons. You hear chains and banging hammers, and excuse me. And so I took that audio, and that's what you'd hear.
Wow. And
also you'd hear the audio of the dungeon scene from Ben-Hur, where they go down to find Ben-Hur's mother and sister, and you hear the big heavy door. So this is that the guests are going down the stairs to come into the Roman sector of Via. They were up in the Jewish sector.
Right.
They come down, that's what they're hearing, and they're and they have a Roman guard waiting for them. So then they round the corner and go through this steel gate, and they go into this little classroom that had been totally morphed into Claudia Procula, who was Pilate's wife. And they come into her room, and she's on her bed having the nightmare. Wow. And so she, no. And so...
Which is beautiful, because you hear her talking, but it's sort of you get to live through that
you're there, and again, the actors know they cannot. These guests are there, but they don't exist to you. You are in your world. Don't get out of it. So they know that. And one of the hardest things of Via, for me, every year, without exception, is keeping the actors focused, because you're doing the same drama 10, 11, maybe 12 times a night. And it can just like anything in ministry, you can get routine. It scares me to death. And so anyway, it was very hard keeping them focused. And
so what would you do? How would you motivate them?
I would tell the room leaders, the room captains, hey, pray with them, have a different actor, take turns praying. So that was a real challenge. And so after Claudia's room, then they would come, on your feet. The governor will see you now. So they lead the people out, and they come into Pilate's room, and they sit down. Pilate's officers, there's a Jewish zealot insurrection going on. You hear them. I took the audio off of Jesus of Nazareth with mobs yelling, "Set Barabbas free! Let Barabbas go!" And so you hear that yelling as they're walking in the room, and you hear horses galloping. I took a bunch of movie sound clips, and layered them. So it's like this. Oh my dear, what's going on here? You're in Jerusalem during the zealot insurrection.
And so you're moving from room to room, and you're getting the audio,
yes.
you're getting the background, what's going on outside.
A million props everywhere and lighting. Yeah. And so when they came, and even the hallways. I had Roman marching music playing in the hallway, so you went from Claudia's room to Pilate's, you heard stuff out there.
Right.
And so anyway, when you come in Pilate's room and you see his officers, they're panicking, trying to keep order because they know Pilate is on his way. Because normally he didn't stay in Jerusalem. He only came for the Passover.
Right.
He would stay in Caesarea. So they're in there talking, Jerusalem's a steaming cauldron. We only have one legion and it's stationed in Syria. There are 28 legions in the empire. And we don't even have one here to keep order. Pilate's going to be furious. So while they're doing this, all of a sudden Pilate's announced, and he comes storming in. He just got off his horse.
Right. Which is... It feels like it's been building up.
It has been.
Since you see the horse on the outside.
Yep. And you hear him, you hear the horse as Pilate, comes storming in the room, and he starts yelling at them. Yeah. And then in Pilate's room, there's Sejanus, who was the right-hand man of the emperor, who happens to be visiting. I don't think historically Sejanus was in Jerusalem at the year of Jesus' death, but we put him in there, a little theatrical license. And then Pilate's doubly embarrassed because he's there. Right. But then Claudia interrupts Pilate, and she tries to intervene for the Nazarene. Right. And they get into a heated, very intense time. She leaves, he mocks her. And then basically... Pilate's scene ends, and then what happens? The guest, on your feet, and they lead the guest out of the fortress Antonia. Then they lead him into the Antonia dungeon, which is right across the hall. It's gloomy, it's dreary, and they have two zealots that we caught, and they wind up eventually being the two thieves on the cross.
Left and right.
Yep. Yeah. So they're hanging there in chains. They're standing on their feet, but they have chains from the ceiling. And the dungeon is one of the most graphically decorated rooms, chains coming down from the ceiling everywhere. Wow. I would find things off the highway and make torture devices out of them,
So you're thinking about this all year long, putting the pieces together. Every year you're looking for what's next.
Yep, and Kim and I, she's a cheap date. We usually go to thrift stores for dates, and she loves it. But anyway, I was constantly looking for Via stuff. And one time I was driving on the Blue Route, which is a major road in the Philadelphia area, and I saw a piece of a tractor trailer that had broken off the back of the tractor trailer. And I saw it, and I went up to the next exit to the U-turn and got it, and it was a major figure piece in the dungeon. Wow. I had to have it. So that's...
But only you could see that piece of junk, and you see it for something else.
Oh, my dear. Yeah. And so it was just, oh, my dear, I'm hoping the Lord resurrects it. But so that in the dungeon, you never see Jesus, but you don't need to, because the intensity is so fierce. And in the dungeon, you're just afraid sitting in there. It's gloomy. They're playing the song, The Stone Table, from the Narnia soundtrack. And so they're taunting the zealots before Pilate comes in, and then he's announced, Pilate, I come in, the foreman of the dungeon stands up, Pilate, and all the other workers in there, Pilate, and then, have they talked? No, but they will, no doubt. But then I hand him a torture weapon. Perhaps this will enhance the persuasion methods. And then your governor knows best. But don't overdo it. They're no good to us dead. At least not yet. And so I threaten the zealots, and I tell them the way we caught them, we drug their wineskins because they robbed a Roman supply train.
Right.
So taunting them, and then I started...
because you're giving this backstory for these characters you know, but it's sort of giving a fun...
Yep, and I start asking the second command of the dungeon if the Nazarene's been flogged yet. You know, the music's so intense, and they're bringing him out now, and the music's like, and they go, lashes, and Polonius looks over at me, 40? You've been in Jerusalem too long, my young friend. We don't abide by the law of Moses, but Lex Romana, law of Rome. And so he looks back over to where Jesus is, and Polonius, and he looks back at me and say, no limit. He goes, no limit. Even he's startled by Jesus can be whipped as many times as we want.
Wow.
Where Jewish law, you can only get 39.
Right.
And so, no limit it will be. Then I'll go, whose rotation? I believe it's Drusus's. And so this massive guy, he's charcoaled up. It's very dark in the dungeon. It's his turn, and the Romans who handled the flagellum, he happens to get Jesus in his rotation, and I wanted him as terrifying as possible for the audience. Wow. So he's standing over there in the dark. Even me telling you, I'm starting to feel bumps on my arms.
Wow.
I'm the procurator and the boss, and I was afraid of him.
Wow.
So I'll say something like, Gaius Lentulus Marcellus, your reputation precedes you. Have real long pauses to build the intensity. Right. And he's just not even saying, he doesn't even say, yes, Pilate. He's just,
he's just,
oh my dear.
Terrifying figure.
Oh my dear.
There.
And I say, the most skilled man in Jerusalem with a flagellum. And the most feared. And we're just staring at each other, and the audience is just like, and I tell him, count to 5 before you answer me. And he goes, it'll be my pleasure, Your Excellency. Wow. And so...
you just feel the violence.
Oh, my dear. And so what happens is when Pilate leaves, then the foreman goes, Drusus, it's time. So Drusus walks across, and there's a bloody stump in the middle of the dungeon. Just blood all over it, and blood on the floor, and all kinds of nails and hammers and torture devices, whatever. And he picks up this flagellum that's chains with pieces of, metal on the end of it, and just starts to shake it. And then he goes backstage, and then we play a little boom box that had the actual audio of the Passion of the Christ whipping scene. Remember how intense that was? And so it's the Roman foreman of the passion scene, the whipping scene, and it's like, oh my dear, I can't. And so the adults the audience is just sitting there listening to their Lord get whipped, and they have to picture it because you don't see it, So that's the dungeon. Wow. They leave the dungeon, they go down the hall through these big gates that we had built right in the hallway of the church, and big Roman gates like they're leaving the Fortress Antonia. And then they go down and they sit in a reflection room where somebody orients them about what they're about to see. And then the next scene is Calvary, where we actually have modern day people who are on cell phones and in normal business suits, and they are the ones who crucify the Lord.
Right. So you're really taking them out of this immersion to now bringing them to where they are.
We're showing the audience that it wasn't just the Jews and the Romans responsible.
Right.
That it's
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So what they did, and then Jesus looks just like somebody in the Passion. He's full of blood. Crown of thorns, real cross. And so they show he's laying on the cross, and they have these modern day people, who are just nailing him to the cross, and casting dice for his clothes and everything, and they raise him up. And then, so that's Calvary. And so what happens is that, after the lightning sound effects, and the narrator on the balcony will read, meditative thoughts about what happened.
Right.
And then he asked, if you have some personal sins that you need to confess and are struggling with, write them on this piece of paper. That they were all given a pen and a paper or whatever. Right. And they write them down. And then there's another cross to the side with nails sticking out. And then before they left Calvary, they put it on
the cross. Wow.
And then when they left that, then they went into a hallway and they had communion. And then they left. So I'm taking a lot of time, but
you could see it, and I want to appreciate your artistic and passion, because even talking about it, you could see.
Oh, my dear. I just got lost in the zone for months. I would watch all my Bible epics that I love and collect for years. I'd have a whole bunch of them every single year, watch them to get into character. And then just, I'd be working on costumes and props and building new ones every year. And I had oversight not only of Rome, I had oversight of Herod's palace. I had oversight of Claudia's room, of the dungeon, and just so did everything. But... and it was just an honor to be part of it. And so the first year, 4 rooms, 60 people, one night.
And this was what year?
2004. And the last year we did it at Emmanuel was 2019, because COVID killed it. Right. But we had 12 rooms. And we were up to, we did go 4 nights for a number of years. Don't remember, maybe we went back to 3 the last night, but we had up close to 1,000 people going through it. And so
4 nights.
They would, roughly every 15 minutes, a group of about 25 people would start walking through the building. Yeah. So it was just,
wow.
And I would just get lost in it, and I didn't want to come out. I'd have to detox from Via. Right. I really did. Right. So because I would listen to these, these movie soundtracks like The Robe and King of Kings, and they would just get me so into character that when Via was over, you'd spend all day Saturday and who knows how many days after that tearing it all down. Yeah. But I started to have to listen to our worship leaders just instrumental music to detox, because I wanted to stay in the zone. Right. I didn't want to leave. But praise the Lord, that every single year it was a rhythmic cycle of my ministry year, where I would go right from Via into summer camps. Right. So
then you have something else. But you knew you could. So this was the first year you weren't able to come back, and I could feel the mourning.
It hurt so badly.
However, it's all part of your stories. You probably need to give Paul a call at this time. He probably needs to give you some 3 words.
Well, it's funny, buddy. So COVID, of course, shut everything down. Yeah. But what happened was when Emmanuel went through some really, really hard times after that, and. So when I wanted to start it again in 2021, Emmanuel just didn't feel to keep doing it, because they were doing other things. They had a new pastor, a great guy, right. And just doing different things. Right. And so anyway,
that was the season for it there.
Season for it there, and it's never been that ever again. And that was the glory years by far, when you had the full Via. But anyway. Pastor Bill Brion, who had started it, he told me to connect with his other pastor on the other side of town, Assembly of God Church, Chris Dito. I'd never met Chris, never heard of him, but Pastor Bill said that he was really into outreach and evangelism. He might be very interested in Via. Contacted Chris. He was. So what we did, this is still COVID going on. Right. So I went and met Chris, and we decided, you know what, it would be too hard to do the individual rooms like we did at Emmanuel. So we decided, let's do them all in the sanctuary, and we'll have
like an interactive play that was in one place.
And we had a stage crew that. They were the key. So what we did, I suggested, tell you what, let's do this. Let's do 3 of the most intense, involved episodes of Via. Let's do Herod's Palace, the Sanhedrin, and Pilate. Right. And I thought, let's call it the villains of Via. Because they were the 3 main villains, right? Caiaphas, Herod, and Pilate. So we called it Villains of Via. We only did 3 of the 12 stations of Big Via, but again, we did it in the sanctuary, and so that's all on my YouTube channel too. And we did it at Parkview for 2 years in a row, Villains of Via. It worked very well, loved his people, working with them. And so then in 2023, they didn't feel to do it. They were going to do something else that year.
Right.
So I was like, I was praying around my house, like, Lord Jesus, I'm sorry, Lord, I just don't feel like Via's over in my heart, Lord. Please, Jesus. Please, Jesus, please. I know, Lord, one of the worst things in the world are when Christians try to keep something going that you want to kill, and I don't want to do that, Lord. Nothing's worse than being under someone or a ministry that their time is done and they keep it going. Oh, don't let me be guilty of that, Lord. But I just do, Lord. Can I even do one night of Via somewhere, Lord? And that was the very next day. I had a pastor call me, Michael, would you do a drama, on Good Friday for me? And it was the very next day. And so I told her, how about this? I'll give you 2 nights. How would you like to do 2? And so, and the cool thing about this is this church was 1.5 miles down the road from me, where we did Villains of Via, it was 17 miles on the other side of town.
Right.
So logistics, it was like, breakfast in bed.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what we did is I whittled it down from Villains of Via, 3 of Via episodes into basically 1.5. What do you mean? I took Pilot's episode, I cut it in half, and I put the dungeon, the main part of the dungeon, or a significant part of it, in between. Wow. So I called that one The Procurator. Because, of course, Pilate oversaw the dungeon and the Fortress Antonia.
Right.
So
it's kind of the one villain of...
The one villain.
Yeah.
And so last Easter season in 2023, we did it at this church down the road. He wanted to do it again this year, but the big difference was the year before, in 2023, I think there were 3 or 4 other churches who partnered with him. And so it was a group effort. And how do I say this? A guaranteed audience.
Right.
And Via is a lot of time and work and money. It's not money, a lot of time and, well, it's a lot of money, but you saw Budget Ministry making stuff out of hubcaps and heat shields off the highway. And,
right.
But anyway.
But still on a large scale.
Yeah, large scale. And so what I did is I called it The Procurator, but when he asked to do it this year, the bummer was those churches were doing something else. Right. And this host pastor is a super guy too, Chuck Rowland. He has a small church. And so I just kept praying and waiting. Lord, we need a miracle. If this is you, would you open up something? And I wanted to do it at Chuck's, but we just needed, this sounds terrible and carnal, and maybe it is, but I needed the guarantee of a bigger audience for...
Because it's so much work.
Because he has a very small church from what I understand. So anyway, so this is, I've been in mourning about it, but...
But it sounds to me... seeing this story of your life, and I'm going to kind of get you to give us a recap. It sounds not like this is the end, but an intermission, And so maybe we'll have to, in a few years, come back and do a recap, because it feels like this is a story, but the story's not over. And that's sort of the beautiful thing of doing these stories from Elim, is the story's not over. It's just the story thus far, So
good point.
We look at what is the next chapters. What is it going to be? It's going to be the same but different, or different but the same. And I think that's the beauty of seeing one man or one couple's story coming through. There's got to be a next chapter.
Jesus, I'm so glad you said that, bro. Because I often wonder, Father, what would somebody like me do next? Because I know I'm a different egg, and some churches are too rigid and dignified for me. Others, I don't know, whatever. Maybe my theology's too heavy for them. You know what I mean? I know I'm a square peg in a round hole, and it's like, Lord, what would I do if I'm not doing what I do? It's like, I don't want to go to heaven yet, but it's like, I've often wondered, will he just stick me in one church? But I did have a brother in 2000, Graham Nelson from Australia. This is connected to what you said, I trust, but we were ministering at a camp in Missouri together, and he saw me minister to the kids. I did the morning chapels, he did the evening, and he said, Michael, can we go on a walk? And I said, sure. And so he said, I really felt the Lord speak to me that your gifting and calling is to the body of Christ at large and not to be confined to one local church. Right. And I have lived on that word through these many years, because there have been a number of times, not a lot, but in different times when a church would be interested in having me come on staff, Right. But I don't know. I've often wondered what's next, and dread that time when the phone stops ringing. You know, maybe it won't. I don't know. I will say I saw one of my theology YouTubes this morning briefly. There was a really old guy preaching, and he was preaching fire. I mean, I was like, wow. I didn't even know who he was, but anyway.
And I always think of, the Apostle John. I did a reenactment of that myself.
Am I getting banished to an island? You know something I don't?
But some of the, he had this amazing life and this great life, and then finally, when he could have thought, oh, that's it. That's
he
the
wrote
time.
Revelation.
Then the biggest part came.
Oh, my dear.
And I think that's the way the Lord works. So, I think there could be the same thing as the Gospels. If we could keep doing this, we could tell stories that would fill. But I think this is a good place to maybe get you to pray.
Sure.
Just for those who are watching. This whole life that has been led by the grace of God. What would you do to pray for those who are watching?
What comes to mind are I call it the 3 cones that guard my life and keep me within the bounds, so to speak, that I believed and lived by for years. Is number 1, the whole world is going to hell. Our dear Lord Jesus said that few are those who find it, but the path to destruction is great, and many are those who find it. The whole world is going to hell. Number 2, Judgment Day is coming. It's barreling towards us with a speed we can't even begin to fathom. And number 3, the gospel must be preached. Those 3 things are like benchmarks or pegs in my life that keep me focused, keep me burdened, keep me praying, keep me before the Lord. And our days are numbered. So, Lord, I'm sure there's not a person in the Elim family across the world, if they happen to see this, that doesn't agree that any day, any minute not spent for the glory of Christ and the spread of his gospel is a wasted minute. So, Lord, that's what our ache and cry is. We want to be used, Lord, by you in every possible way. So, Jesus, we just pray, draw us to yourself. Open up the riches of your word that cause us to know and to love you more. And your power, Lord Jesus, by your precious Holy Spirit, to spread it to your people and to the lost. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen. And cut.
Thanks for the honor, buddy.
Thank you. This has been Stories from Elim with Michael Guerty. And gonna have to get you back for the next chapter.
It's my honor, buddy. Wow, still blown away. You asked me to. Oh my dear, that's the nut who comes out of a time machine.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're brothers of the time machine. So
yep. Wow.
Thank you so much,
buddy.